I'd like to call this regular Jamestown School Board meeting to order. It's May 16th, 2022 at 5:15 p.m. in the Thompson Community Room in the middle school. I would like to thank all of those in the audience, and please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Dan, could you read the school board norms?
The board developed norms are to share and respect varied opinions and speak with a united voice once a decision has been reached, to prudently prioritize resources in a student-centric manner that aligns with the district's strategic plan, to exhibit a mindset of continuous improvement through adequate preparation for meetings and a commitment to board education, to commit to assessing board effectiveness to ensure high-quality governance for the staff, students, and community of Jamestown.
Thank you, Dan. We don't have any public communication tonight. And are there any conflicts of interest that the board would wish to declare? Okay, there being none. Before we move into the next part of the agenda, would the board be okay with moving under the regular meeting, part 3, D2, and H3, just because we have guests here in the audience, and they're here already, and if they could go first, does anyone have opposed to that? Okay. I'd like to move them under the very first thing of the regular agenda, if that's okay. Okay. So we'll make note of that. Number 2, consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve, or would anyone like to remove anything off of there? Motion? Is there a second? Second by Gail. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Under regular meeting, so now we're moving on to D, number 2, education competency tag update. Brian Edens, Lori Hare, and Luke Anderson. Please come forward and introduce yourself.
Good evening. So, on behalf of Brian Edens, Lori here, and myself with the TAG committee, over the last 3 years, the TAG program has went under significant change from our COVID year where we shut down early to Jamestown Virtual Academy and now getting back into regular programming. So throughout the transition over the last 3 years, we've been reviewing the effectiveness of the program and how we can enhance the learning experience for all of our students, not only identified as talented and gifted students, but also all classrooms at a more consistent and deeper level. Some of the issues that we have run into in our current programming are limited space available inside of buildings. Many of their classes take place in different rooms depending on the day they're there. Whether there's programs that may be in the gym, it varies greatly throughout the day. Lack of consistent time with students. Under the current program, we have a maximum of 34 hours per year per content area. With the changes, we'll be able to provide over 100 hours of in-depth instruction in each content area. So triple the amount of exposure for those students. Class and building needs such as classroom parties, rehearsals, and field trips take precedence, which impacts that instruction. Currently they're on a Monday through Friday schedule. Fridays are obviously the days that we miss the most throughout the year, so the change will provide a more consistent instructional approach for the program. Our mission statement here at JPS is engaging students with challenging and innovative experiences to prepare them for future success. Within our vision statement, we reference the importance of creativity and critical thinking, as well as personalized and authentic experiences, which all lend themselves to this program. To connect to our mission and vision, we've decided to rename the TAG program to the Jamestown Innovation Academy. Along with the name change, we'd like to share out some changes that will be coming in the 2022-2023 school year as we pilot the new Jamestown Innovation Academy. Prior to making these changes, as a TAG team, we conducted both a stakeholder focus group as well as a district-wide teacher survey. Through these feedback opportunities, we were able to effectively use feedback to guide our change process. I'll now hand it over to Brian and Lori to share out some of the changes.
Hello, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Brian Edens. I've been part of the TAG program for the last 10 years now, so it's kind of excited to introduce a new idea and yeah, see how it all goes. Have just a little bit of information we'll put up on the board here. Like I just said, about the last 15 years, the TAG program has been about like it is, as a pull-out program, 1 hour a week. Currently, we're in the 5 elementary schools for math and reading. The whole thing with making these changes is just to make a more impactful difference of the learning, be more in depth with our learning. Having a whole day is something I'm really excited about, so we can take the learning just to another level, just to go really deep with a lot of different things. Yeah, and we'll also show you kind of just a sample schedule here at the end. So being in 5 schools just gives just certain challenges. Supplies are all over the place. Time to collaborate as a team becomes limited. Being all under one roof is going to be really awesome, just so we have everything together. We'll have proximity to busing, so if that would become an issue, we'd be right there, especially if we do get into the James Valley Career Technology Center. A lot of resources available inside of there, and it also gives us opportunities just to collaborate with a bunch of different stakeholders. Increasing time with students, like Mr. Anderson had said, just going to this model, being able to triple the time that we get to spend with students, this is going to give us a lot of time just to go more in depth, just having a better program overall with high quality content and product. Effective classroom spacing. In the past, we've been in places like the hallway or the gym or the stage, or every once in a while we get our own classroom, but just having a consistent space is going to be a really helpful tool, and having all of our supplies again in one location. And this is just a quick sample that we put together of what a day might look like. Having an opening right away, and then we're planning on having some sort of time where we can work with students with their core content from their classroom. Then getting into some of our curriculum that we have, like our hands-on equations. William and Mary is another curriculum that we use a lot. This stuff is all, probably can change, but yeah, this is kind of just a sample. Yeah, so basically it'll be 3 days a week, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. One day, like Tuesdays, for example, might be 3rd grade, then 4th grade, then 5th grade. So, yeah, I'll hand it over to Lori from here.
Hi, and so another benefit we find is the increasing collaboration with not only each other, because normally we're not ever in the same place, which makes it tough as a team to be able to collaborate, so we'll have that opportunity to work together, and also to collaborate with other teachers. As you saw, there were 3 days that will be with students, and those other 2 days, we hope to be in classrooms collaborating with teachers so that we can see more of that continuation into the classroom and supporting classrooms that wouldn't otherwise get the TAG program. So, and then some of the possibilities we feel inside the Innovation Academy is just the problem-based learning, project-based learning, more in-depth learning, the collaboration with the high school and vocational center. There's lots of resources there that we can use as we develop this program. I know they have aerospace going on it, and when we took the tour, that was something that we could see, us building from elementary and going up. So building those relationships across schools too is going to be a benefit, because all 3rd graders that qualified for the TAG program would all be in the same place at the same time. So that's really exciting for us to see that they'll have built some friendships. As they move into middle school, they'll already have that core group of people that they'll have some interests with. So that's exciting. And again, working with classroom teachers more. We hope to develop some clubs, science fairs, service projects too with this group of kids as we go too. And then, as we said, this is a piloting program, so we'll be reevaluating the program as we go. And we have right now 2 program reviews that we have scheduled for the first semester and second semester. So we can reevaluate whether this is for us or not. It will be an opt-in, opt-out program, just as it is now, where parents have to decide if they're okay with their child leaving the core classroom to come to this or not. So that would have to, again, be a part of it. So as we continue our path to standards-based learning, we'll be reevaluating how this is going to look, because our evaluations right now could change as far as how kids could qualify for the program. We are hoping to broaden the spectrum here so that more kids can be involved. So.
Thank you for the information, Dr. Leck. Go ahead.
Well, first, Brian and Lori and Luke, I want to thank you all. I thought you could get away. I saw that. I appreciate it, but I can understand the feeling. But I want to give the TAG staff credit. This has been a conversation that has been a number of different, probably 5 years was the very first time, and it was Mrs. Warner and Mr. Edens initially talking about this 5 years ago. And then we transitioned to Mrs. Anderson and now Mrs. Hare. So this has been a conversation that's occurred for a period of time and has had a chance to mature. And one of the things that I really appreciated about this process, 2 things. One, that it's a pilot, knowing that this isn't something that we've just said, we're moving forward and this is what we're going to do and this is the way it's going to be. It's a pilot. It's being tried. And to see if this is the right option. I like that, first of all. Second, I really appreciate the focus groups and the conversations that you've had with staff. And I want you to, can you talk a little bit about the feedback that came from parents and from staff? What were some of the questions? What were some of the things they were excited about? Maybe some of the things they were concerned about, and how did that impact the development? And maybe that's a question for Luke or
I think
Brian or Lori.
they'll concede this one to me, I think.
Okay.
So overall surveys, teacher surveys, our teachers certainly see the value in the programming and certainly see how this programming change can impact kids. The concerns that are most common, that we've most addressed with folks, are missing that day, core content area with their classmates. That's the first one that comes up. And that's part of the programming with it being an opt-in, opt-out is for those folks that are uncomfortable with that. It's certainly not something we want to just say, this is what we're doing. They have the option to opt into that program. The students that we're working with in this program during those 3 days are students that are showing mastery of skills in their content areas. So when it comes to that mastery piece, they've already got that. If they're struggling in an area, I think Mr. Edens had mentioned there's time every day that's devoted to those core content areas as well. And probably the biggest, I think, asset to this program, along with the change for those students that have been identified, is the opportunity to get into classrooms to provide those innovating experiences in every classroom. Tech integration is a huge piece of the puzzle that we need to develop as a school, and this is one way for us to start to do that. So that's one that was missing that day, was a concern. Logistically was our concern moving forward, like how do we get this done? Mr. Heinert and Mr. Gaylor have been fantastic to work with up at the CTC and the high school, working through some room opportunities. We toured the high school and the CTC to look for what is the best space. One of our conversations, our concerns was at the high school. We have these, because there were rooms available at the high school as well, putting these young bodies into a high school with a bunch of 17 and 18-year-olds. So the CTC provides an option that we can enter and exit the building without impacting instruction for them, while also still providing this really unique opportunity. There's a lot of stuff on our tour, the makerspace, that was provided, that there's things that students at the high school are doing that will benefit this program. We've already talked as far as the Teacher's Aid program, being able to have students working directly with our elementary students. So the partnership piece was a concern, but I feel is a strength moving into the program. I would guess that was the big piece for us, is the missing day of school. It's the missed day of school. As far as parent, when we had our parent focus group, I'll be honest with you, there was a lot of excitement. There wasn't a lot of, why are we doing this? It was like, oh my gosh, I wish my kid wasn't a fifth grader. I wish they weren't moving to the middle school right now. I'd love to have them to have this opportunity. The hardest part for us on the teacher aspect is we're all educators too, and losing that time with your students is not easy for any classroom teacher. And that's kind of the point of the piloting, is to see how that fits into a school year. How does that mesh? But our belief is through our activity development. One of the things we've talked about is developing kits that could go out into the classroom. I always liken it to when I taught fourth grade. We had fur kits at the state library, and we would call and order them, and they would deliver them to the school, so we had access to them for a unit. Lessons were developed. It didn't require more time out of the classroom for our classroom teachers. In this case, that's what we intend to do. Build those kits. We'd be able to come in and provide a lesson to introduce a new whatever it is, and then teachers can expand on that without having all of that work to do to develop their own lessons. So it's like any program, we're expecting change, needing to change some things as we go, but the group of people that we've been working with has been willing to really open to all of the change and trying to make it a better experience.
Other questions from the board? Diane, go ahead. And Melissa.
Luke, boy, that was great. You answered almost every question I had. I'm wondering if you have every parent choose to buy in to the Innovation Academy, what kind of numbers are you looking at with each grade?
Well, so our evaluation process wouldn't change at all, and we're roughly right around 20 kids per grade, give or take, so I don't see that changing until maybe we get further into the standards base, getting deeper into that and seeing how those numbers might fluctuate after that. But
Okay, and a follow-up question. I could see parents being excited, but those students being taken from their friends for a day, do you see any pushback there?
yeah, I think that was kind of addressed in our parent meeting, because there were some students that might have that anxiety. That's also why we said it was an opt-in, opt-out program. So maybe they do decide to come and do it for the first month or whatever, and they don't feel like they're missing out on in the classroom. They have that option to opt out of it. So, yep.
I'll just follow up a little bit on what he had talked about as far as within that opt-in, opt-out. The questions certainly remain as far as missing a day with their classmates. Through student interviews, they'll tell you they're excited. So it's kind of that two sides of the coin there, and I think we'll see that a lot as we move into this transition. Ideally, as this evolves and moves forward, this is kind of that carrot to dangle to go, let's reach out and be great in what we're doing and continue to evolve and find ways to get more kids involved in this, because those numbers are right now at 20, we can facilitate more numbers than that right now. We feel we can go larger than that if our identification process evolves and we find that we have more kids we're missing. We feel we do have room to expand that.
Melissa?
I'm assuming that the kids that are being pulled or taken to the Innovation School are going to be still responsible for their regular classwork that they're missing while they're gone? And if so, how are you going to get them to, if you're introducing new topics and things, how are you going to handle that?
It's a really, I'm glad you asked that, because that's one of the concerns that I should have shared that that have been brought forward. So those students that are identified, generally speaking, and I'm not going to say it's all of them, but they've already showed mastery in the content area, and especially as we move towards our standards-based learning approach, there would be evidence of mastery in the content. So it's not as if they're not missing it, they are. But if there's mastery that's been displayed already, this is that enrichment opportunity to get to that 4, to be going above and beyond. that'll take a little bit of time, especially with teachers, because that's going to be one of the toughest ones, is missing that time. We all like to be the one that introduces our lesson to our class, but I believe in Brian's portion, he talked about the collaboration between teachers and the program. I think that's where our collaboration opportunity is really going to grow, because they can work together. Okay, what are you working on? How would you like it introduced? Because there is time set aside for that introduction of new content, and that will take place different at different schools. You know, we have pacing guides and things that we go off of, but every school is going to be different at a different spot. So being able to open that clear communication and collaboration is going to really give us an opportunity to I think, become stronger with the classroom teachers than we currently are. Right now, we're going to get kids, we're pulling them out, and I think we're missing that collaboration opportunity from the classroom to the program.
Thank you. Any other? Aaron, go ahead.
Just so I understand, you got 3 days that you're targeting for full day. Is it going to be like third grade on Tuesday, fourth grade on Wednesday, fifth grade on Thursday? Is that kind of how it's
That's the
structured?
plan right now, yes.
Okay.
Third, fourth, and fifth in those 3 days. We identified Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday because they are the days that are impacted least when it comes to those long weekends in those areas, so that opportunity remains there for them. I know we're focusing on the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and that's a big part of our discussion today. But for me, as a building principal, one of the things that when I took the TAG coordinator position, our MO the whole time since this point has been, how do we get into the classrooms more? So it's not an exclusive program. That's also part of the reason for using the Innovation Academy is our new name, because it's truly trying to be innovating for all. So those other 2 days, there's a ton of planning that'll go into those 3 days. So they're 3 days, just to give you a little bit of we showed a schedule, but those kids are on site all day. There's going to be that opportunity for Phi Ed in there. That's something that has been talked about. What if it's a day for PE for some of those kids, which again, in a pilot opt-out program, these are things that are discussions that we have with families. The lunch program, they're having lunch with these. Like, this is a true, I don't know if you want to call it a camp experience, but they're spending the day together. This is not, they're here and then they're gone. And with the way it's set up right now, they would have an opportunity. We have some students that are very gifted in math, and reading may not be their strong suit. So they're still going to be, if they're not in that reading, they would still have core content reading instruction given by classroom teacher in the areas that they're struggling. And the area of mastery is where these two will focus their instruction. So, but yeah, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is the idea right now.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Well, thank you. Very exciting
you.
and really great to see the career tech resources also being used by other grade levels. So it's great news. So thank you. So as we change our agenda, next is H, number 3, curriculum assessment instruction, approval of a revised 2022 to 2023 school calendar. Please come forward and introduce yourself and give us a little background information.
Okay. I'm Kelly Bauer, and I teach first grade at Gusner, for those of you that don't know me. And I'm on the standards-based learning leadership team, representing K through 2.
And I'm Rachel Castett. I am a 4th grade teacher at Lincoln Elementary, and I'm representing the 3 through 5 grade levels on the standard-based learning committee.
And Rachel's going to hand you a little sheet to pass around. But standards-based learning has been something that our district has been kind of looking at for the last several years. In 2018, we, at the elementary level, prioritized our state standards and decided what we really wanted at each grade level as a priority. And then in 2021, we formed this standards-based learning leadership team that has Rachel and I representing elementary teachers. There's 3 elementary admin, there's a middle school teacher, a high school teacher, and then administration from the middle school and high school on that leadership team. This fall, we got some training through Marzano, which was really eye-opening and really cool for us to see the potential of standards-based learning. And then this spring, we actually started the process of writing our proficiency scales for each priority standard that we have. And you have an example in front of you of a proficiency scale, and we'll talk a little bit more about about that in a minute.
All right. I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about what you see in front of you there. This is an example of a first grade proficiency scale. So I'm honestly going to just kind of walk you through a little bit what this is. Just to give you a little background on this, each grade level has somewhere between 30 to 40 of these that we created for math and ELA. So a lot of these have been worked on at each grade level, and content areas are being worked on in middle school and high school as well. These are, at the top, the standard is identified that we decided was a priority within our district. And then we go through and we level out what proficiency would look like for our students with each of these standards. So I'm going to start at the 3 because that's where we started when we were working on these. And the level 3 is proficiency, which is the language of the standard. So if you look at the column here, it says the students will, what's written there is the standard exactly. So this is the language of the standard. This is exactly what the kids need to be able to do to reach what is considered proficiency or mastery, like Luke was saying, in this standard, within this standard. And once we did that, we went down to the level 2, and the level 2 is simple procedures that the kids need to know, basic processes that they need in order to be able to complete and move on to that level 3. So just background knowledge basically that they need. A lot of it's vocabulary that they have to be aware of and knowledgeable of in order to be able to reach that level 3. So this example here is money, and it talks that they need to be able to know to recall specific terms like dollar and bill and coin and quarter in order to be able to move to proficiency in that. And from the level 2, we went up to the level 4, which again, it's kind of nice that the TAG program went before us because this is where they could tie into the classroom collaboration that they were talking about. This is an extension on the standard. A lot of this is real life examples of how they could utilize this and extending it above that proficiency level. So we went through and thought of ways that the student could go above and beyond the standard in that. And then the work that we have started, but this is definitely where we moving forward, which Kelly's going to talk about more here, is the activities and the assessments. And the activities, a lot of what we've done so far is gone through the resources that we have in the district and said, okay, we have this resource in reading, we have this resource in math. What are some things that we could pull in that would help to teach this standard at these varying levels for kids? So just to give, not that it's a hard and fast, you have to use this, but here's the resources that we have available to you, and here's some ways that you can address this standard. And then the assessments are something that we want to create common assessments that will be used district-wide for, again, to show students' mastery at these varying levels.
So yeah, we've started the work here. 2 representatives from each grade level, K through 5, worked on writing these scales, but there's still a lot to be done, like Rachel said, with activities and assessments. And we're looking at some assessment work maybe in the summer, but next year, the 22-23 school year, our plan is just for these teachers to get to know their skills. So to teach with the skills, decide like this works, this definitely doesn't work, be able to tweak them, change them. Hopefully we'll have time as grade levels to get together and really be able to dive into what's working and what's not working with these skills so that we are confident moving forward with the skills that we have, because in the 23-24 school year, K1, 2, and grade 6 are going to be reporting with these skills. So that means we're going to look at these skills, and this is going to be how we determine grades, proficiency, really the word is proficiency for each student. And then the 24-25 school year, it'll be 3 through 5, 7, 8, 9, and 10 proposed. This is the hope. And then moving forward from there, yeah, so really as a first grade teacher looking at this, I need next year with my grade level to really be able to dive into these scales so that we know that we have a good scale moving forward to report to parents proficiency.
So moving forward, the proposal that the SBL committee has is that we have 2 additional PD days added to our calendar so that we can do additional work on this. We talked about how there's training that we have to do with this. There's building the assessments that we have to do, finding more activities, diving into those standards, and deciding what's working and what's not working with those different things. So that's the proposal with this. And with that, we talked about, in this group, we talked about how part of those days would be working with our grade levels or content areas for our upper grades on that, and part of those days would also be working on MTSSB things that the district is bringing in as well. And the proposed days that the committee came up with were October 10th and March 20th.
Overall, I just want to say that teachers working on this have been really, really excited. It's been a really positive thing. I've been blown away by this being something big and kind of, it's not really new because we've been teaching with standards, but having things just organized, and this is working together in the collaboration. The teachers that have been working on these have been really excited, and I think it's a positive thing moving forward. So.
And just to add to that, like Kelly said, we've been working with standards, but just the feedback from the team that's working, just diving into them so much deeper and getting, okay, what is the standard really asking our kids to do and asking our kids to know, has been very eye-opening at every grade level, I think. So just continuing that work moving forward, everyone seems to be really excited about it, and yeah. That's all we got.
So when we talk professional development, one of the biggest things elementary-wise, with us not being in the same building, that creates a hurdle that the middle school and the high school don't have, because they can collaborate in-house. So whenever we do anything with professional development, the most common theme is always, I want more time with my grade level teammates. So that's a big part of this proposal, is just providing that time for them to work together. So when you start looking at assessments and you start looking at the activities that go along with this, all of those stakeholders have input on the process. What assessments, and what we generally find is when they get together, there's amazing things going on at every building, and they're able to bounce ideas and make it work for their kids, in their building. So with the thread of PD providing that opportunity, that's a big piece to this. The other part of that, as Mrs. Bauer had mentioned with the MTSSB stuff we're working on, part of that standards base is the connection to the behavior pathways that we're developing as well. So they really marry quite nicely that way. So I think it's a good, there's a lot of positive things going on during those days. There are dedicated days that they're not just days. We have plenty of work to do and the right work to do with those folks during those days.
Dr. Leck, do you have any comments?
I do. So the conversation in Jamestown Public Schools around standards-based learning, you might be most familiar with standards-based learning from the most recent iteration of the strategic plan, which outlines standards-based learning. But this has been a conversation, this is my 9th year in the district, this conversation predates me. And I think we have a lot of staff that are talking about, well, when are we ever going to do this? We talk about it a lot, we kind of prepare for it a lot, but when are we actually going to do it? And that's what this team has done and targeted, okay, now we have a commitment from our district to do it, we are going to go forth and do it the right way. And I appreciate the work that's done, of course, but also the recognition that we can't do this well if we don't prepare for it well. And that's what you're hearing, that there just isn't enough time in our PD time now to do it. And the days to hours flexibility that we have, we would have enough cushion in that, in our calendar. That's legislative intent, as long as they are contracted time, as long as that is contracted time, that is the intent of days to hours. And I would argue that when you do such good work in improving the classroom quality, you've more than made up those 2 days that you've missed long-term for our students. I'm certainly supportive, and I suggested this potential option to the group, and I think we're surprised that was an option, or not so much that I think we all knew it was an option, but that we would push for this kind of an additional time. But I think that's, really that's the benefit of what Days to Hours provides. We can look at what our needs are right now and make a suggestion that can make the work better, the work time better for our teachers, but also the end product better for our students.
Any questions or comments from the board? Jason? And Aaron?
So the proposal takes us from 2 professional days to 4 throughout the year? 3 to 5, okay, sorry, 3 to 5, adds 2. No impact on student contact time because we have them built in, correct?
No, there would be the change of the 2 days, but still far beyond what is required by the state of North Dakota.
And then, so I like the idea that these will be very targeted activities for these days. So is that target expected to be the assessments and activities piece or evaluation of how it's going? I mean, you said there might be some summer work to finish up these, so could you just go through quick what you hope to see during those those days?
So the summer stuff is essentially what that work is learning how to build those assessments. So Mr. Gaylor at the high school has extensive experience in that. He would be a part of doing a workshop to help build the assessments in the summer. Those days in the summer are obviously they're teacher elective. If they would like to be a part of that, they're able to. If they can't, that's okay too. We're using the staff that are a part of those assessment building days to learn how to build those assessments accordingly. Then when we come back in the fall to build those assessments with all of our folks, all at the grade level. It's very hard outside of the school year to get all of our folks from a grade level to any kind of a training like that. So having some that are trained in it allows us to efficiently put it into action next fall. The evaluation piece will start to come at the end of the year next year. So as I think Kelly mentioned, we're going to be rolling it out next year. In the spring next year, we're going to be looking at providing parents at the elementary level with an example of what standards-based reporting would look like. Sharing out so we get ahead of that so they understand the change, what we're doing. So when we have that spring conference, they'd have an opportunity to see that. At the current kindergarten has a form of a standards-based assessment or reporting right now. We go to first grade, which is ESNU, and then we go to second grade, which is ABCD. So this is going to just give us a nice streamlined process. The evaluation tool I anticipate being the second year where we start to really look at how did the spring go, what do we need to modify as we have rolled this out. But at the same time, it will happen throughout the process for sure. Yeah, a lot of this PD that we're talking about will be building at the grade levels, just making sure everybody's input is involved in that.
If I could just make one clarification, I wasn't thinking about January PD, so 4 to 6.
4 to 6, thank you.
And then Aaron was next. Yep, Aaron was, go ahead, Aaron.
So I just want to get an idea here, the total scope of work that's in front of you with this here. So what you gave to us here is one example of one standard, right? And so the plan is to develop something like this for every standard. How many standards?
So we actually have developed most of them, K through 5, already. Currently, we went through and counted, and there's 15 to 30 ELA for each grade level that were created. It just depends on the grade level, and 15 to 20 standard or proficiency scales for math per grade level that we've created. That the outline of it is created. The activities and assessments haven't been created yet, but the outline, the 4, 3, 2 have been done on most of them. If that answers your question.
Yes, it does, thank you.
I would extend on that one as far as, so the work that the groups have done now, when they have met at the grade level, it's all work that is more black and white than the work that's going to be done in the fall. So the work is, we have state standards that we've identified as priority standards. So we've done these scales. And the fall is where that teacher autonomy comes in. Everybody's able to have input in those assessments. Everybody's able to have input in those activities. So it's different work for sure. This was the tedious work. The groups that had met on this worked full days, start to stop. I mean, it was certainly tedious work, but I think we have them all done other than the activities and the assessments. So, yeah, foundation's there.
Diane, go ahead.
Well, you will get no argument from me that you need some more time. There's no doubt about it. I want to switch gears and, for us and for our public, talk a bit about how this ties into DPI, Common Core, the standards that are coming out of the state, and just so our public is aware of what we're doing here on the ground.
You don't want that? Okay, so as far, there's standards, you know, we have standards across all content areas. As a district, we've identified what are our priority standards. The state also has priority standards that they've established that we follow to make sure that we're getting a well-rounded instruction. What starts to change for us here is it's what we're teaching is not so different. The level to which we dive into certain areas will change. So as far as instruction goes, we're not. It's not like a huge shift away from what we're doing now. What I liken it to is this, and some may disagree. I'm not sure, but I'll share it anyways. When we grade students under the current structure and the structure that I went to school with, if you worked really hard and you had great support at home and you did everything you needed to do, you could play the game of school and do really well. You could be an A or B student because you worked really hard. We have students of varying backgrounds, as all districts do. What this shift does for us is allow us to still target that instruction for all, as we would, to make sure that all students are getting that well-rounded education. But those students that may lack some of that support still have the opportunity to be just as successful without the outside opportunities. I coached basketball for a long time. In the game of basketball, you practice, and then you have a game, and then you get to go back to practice and practice some more to be able to fix what is missing, and then you get another game to be able to show how you've improved. That's essentially what we're doing. We're giving students an opportunity to be able to increase their competency in their learning without being quote-unquote punished along the way. It'll be a paradigm shift for sure, going from A, B, C, D, F, but with the right work that's being done now and the work that we intend to do next year as we enter into this, I think we can get ahead of the communication piece and really share out with families what that means. I envision, well, I know at our building we've talked back to school will look a little different for us this year, starting to introduce that early so that parents are not blindsided by that. This is what we're doing. And Dr. Lecken mentioned it. I taught fourth grade a long time ago, and I was prior to his time here, and that was being talked about then. So it's, I think everybody believes it's the right work. It's just a matter of being able to share that out the right way with folks.
That was a wonderful answer, and I really understand now, and I think our public will too. Would you say most medium to large districts are doing this around the state?
You know, it really does vary. If you look around this area, there's probably 4 or 5 schools that have been in this work for quite a while. I would say the larger schools have been slower to the work because it is a bigger lift for, those bigger districts to get across multiple grade levels. I'm not even going to speak to the high school part of it because that's not my area, but that's, as Gail will know when it comes to the grade point average and those things that come with, but everybody's evolving, college is involved, so yeah, it's work that's being done out there. I think it's work that always has to evolve, though. That's one thing we have to really realize is that this is a constant review for our district. How can we make it better? How can we be more efficient in the process?
Melissa?
I wholeheartedly agree that professional development days are needed. I just have a little bit of a question on some of the days that are being proposed, because I'm looking at just even October. There's going to be 2 4-day weekends, and that's going to cause a lot of challenge for parents who may have to take off of work and stuff as opposed to having maybe some of those broken out so that it creates a 3-day weekend instead of a 4-day.
Yeah, we talked, I mean, those are just suggestions, so you guys can make a different call if that's what you want. We had talked about tacking them onto a, already a weekend in hopes that, you know, that might be easier for families if they were going anywhere. And then they're kind of distributed, October and then March, just because that's kind of where we see there being work that needs to be done, and that, that end of March, kind of like reviewing and evaluating, like Mr. Anderson said, and then at the beginning of the year, kind of mapping out, okay, when are we gonna use these scales? We've gotten a start in our curriculum, so just kind of the timing of them, but they're definitely just suggestions.
Dr.
Yeah, I would say that was a big part of our conversation, actually, and where do we define those days? How do we pick out which days are right? And the one thing we found for certain is that we're not sure, you know, how you do that. The discussion revolved around two different things: creating a separate 3-day weekend where your staff retention for those types of things is going to be higher, not connected to another long weekend, that type of thing. So we looked at both those options. We had a lot of discussion on this very thing, trying to figure out how is it going to be least impactful to families, because that's certainly our goal with these days. And we decided to kind of go with one of each. Let's try that the first year, see which one has a greater impact, and then we can adjust accordingly, you know, moving forward when that work continues. But that was a lot of our conversation in this process.
Dr. Leck?
I would share a little bit on that too. I agree. You know, one thing that wasn't mentioned, this actually came to the District School Improvement Committee also and had a conversation around days. You know, what days would be best, and so staff really had a chance to have those discussions about, well, what days would be best. And I guess from my perspective, as long as they are days that, it's one of the reasons why we're bringing it up now, so people can prepare. You know, if you resend out a calendar, people can adjust their own schedules based on what the days off are. We already have days off, and as long as people know ahead of time, we should be able to accommodate. But those are the discussions around. I think there isn't a perfect set of days, but these were recommended, you know, contemplatively. They weren't just selected out of the air, and I think they have a fair rationale for why those days were selected.
Any other questions or comments? Gail?
I would just like to say I really like the idea of having it be a whole day. Anytime you meet for 2 hours, you lose so much time, and I think so much more will be accomplished. That was great thinking by whoever did that. And also getting people to be able to come together. So excellent work. Thank you.
Is there Jason, go ahead.
So the review and continuation of these as far as revising, updating, do you see that falling on the SBL, the team, or the school improvement committee, or grade level? Not sure yet.
I would say a combination, all the above. Ideally, in our PD days, as we develop them moving forward, I think that just kind of becomes a part of the every year plan, that review cycle, getting that district school improvement. I certainly see it being a part of that to review where we're at as far as progression in that, and then from that district school improvement, then maybe subbing that out a little bit to those other committees to answer some of those questions and be able to create the path.
Any other questions, comments from the board? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the revised 2022-2023 school calendar? Motion by Melissa, second by Gail. Any further discussion on this topic? All those in favor of this, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. And then we will be sending this out to the public, right, that it's a revised, so anyone who has vacation plans, childcare plans, all those kinds of things, that we'll give them plenty of notice for this. So it's October 10th and March 20th. There will be no regular school those days, so just for our public's information. Thank you for your
Thank you
time.
from the SBL team for taking this into consideration. I think it's the right work, so we thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. We will be having our public demographic planning meeting here shortly. There's a couple of their reports that are non-action items. Is the board willing to have our student council report and our political competency, reports right now? Is that okay with the board? Okay. Will, come forward. So this is regular meeting 3C, student council report.
Luckily, I was a Senate page, so they paid me to sit and listen to people talk. I'm Will Nelson. I am the new JHS Executive Student Council President. Monica wanted to join you guys tonight. She's the current president, but she was busy, so she sent me with a report. It's rather brief. First, we had a spring fling week about 2 weeks ago. We didn't have the turnout we expected, mostly due to activities. We had a dance at the end of the week, and then we had dress-up days, but there just wasn't as much participation as there might have been. We've not done a spring fling in quite a while, but we weren't able to do Morp Week, which usually takes place in the week of prom, and it's a variety of activities. So we don't know how we're going to approach that next year, whether we'll do Morp and or spring fling. And then we also had the election of our 2022 through 2023 student council class boards, and at our meeting on Wednesday, we'll introduce those boards and we'll get them in place for next year. And lastly, the seniors planned a senior send-off day where the seniors are invited to wear a shirt that represents their future plans, whether that be where they're going to college, if they're going into the armed forces, or something to represent the career they're pursuing. So that's all I have for you.
Thank you. I like that, the senior send-off. That's a neat idea. Any questions for Will? Well, thank you very much. We appreciate those reports. And thank you for being patient and waiting for us. The next is our political competency. This is under regular meeting 3, and it's D1, drug court. John Conway, please come forward.
Good evening. Oops. I was asked to talk about drug court. I was in the original startup of drug court about 12 years ago. I was trying to get the specific date when we started, but I think 12 years is about the time that we started. And I took about 5 years off. Candy Wingenbach took over for about 5 years. And after she retired last year, I got back into drug court. Drug court is the official name of our drug court is Barnes-Stutzman County Drug Court. So it's the 2 counties, and it encompasses all the schools and communities within these counties. So when we talk about the students that we're working with, it's not just Jamestown students, it's Valley City students, Medina, Pingree Buchanan, Montpelier. So we have a variety of students. It is a specialty court, and it's a court that's set up to work with students that deal with substance abuse. And they are kids that were adjudicated originally. They've gone through the juvenile court system. They had some delinquent charges on them. And rather than keeping them in that going through the juvenile court in that direction, seeing that it was that they were having issues with substance abuse, they gave them the option if they would want to go into drug court. And when I say option, it is an option with the families because they do have to agree upon it. There's an evaluation. Not everybody can get into it. There's kind of an intense evaluation. Again, if you're a student that just gets a minor infraction and you may have gotten caught for paraphernalia or something like that, you're not going to be on drug court. It's something that's over and over and over. It's also the reason why the drug court was established is to keep the kids in the communities rather than having them go to facilities outside the communities. We do intense supervision, frequent drug testing. We have treatment programs. We have weekly court hearings, which is every Wednesday. And we use sanctions and a lot of incentives. We have a drug court team that's made up of a judge, 2 lawyers. We have a law enforcement, the school districts that are involved with the students, treatment providers, and the probation officers. The program consists of 4 paths, and it takes about anywhere from 9 to 12 months to complete the paths. We have had, there are kids that will succeed and get done in about 8 months. That's very rare. And there are some kids that will go a little bit over 12 months, but most of the time it's in that 9 to 12. So, the one thing about this is that it's kind of a village type of approach. It's when we have a court hearing, we meet prior to having the students come in, and we go through each student and we talk about their week. We talk about, we'll go through and talk about what the providers that have met with them. They talk about how they responded to treatment. We'll talk about school, how that went for them. We'll read what the parents have talked about. And then from that, then we'll talk about incentives or maybe sanctions. The reason why I mentioned when I started to now, court has changed a little bit. We had maybe more sanctions when we first started than what we're doing right now. We probably used, back when we first started, we probably would send a student to detention, which is jail. And we actually had detention in Jamestown when we first started. And then because the jail was outsourcing or actually bringing people in, we lost space there. And we started using Fargo or Cass County. They started doing the same thing, so we lost space there. So now where we go to is actually in Clay County, which is Moorhead. So when we end up sending a student, and it's for a total of 2 days, we'll send them into Clay County. There's a big facility in Moorhead. And then that is going to come to an end. The state legislature has said that now that with juveniles that they're not going to utilize that procedure. So we're going to lose that sanction. So we're just going to have to deal with the students in our community with whatever sanctions we can deal with. So, but we started out with Judge Merrick. That was our first judge. And now we have Judge Lefevre, and he was a former student of mine. And the lawyer also was a former student of mine. So that tells you how long I've been in Jamestown. So any questions?
Thank you for the report, John. Go ahead, Gail.
Addiction is a real challenge, and especially a real challenge for high school students. It concerns me that what you reported about the legislature getting rid of kind of one safety net that you have. I've kind of seen over the years a continued reduction in these safety nets as a state, which I think presents a unique challenge to our high school because we really do believe in learning for all, and that means we'll have some challenges as a result. What do we have, and what is happening with services like rehabilitation services within Jamestown? What is happening to support groups for these students? What kinds of supports are in place? And we also know, I mean, I doubt it's changed from when I'm there. When we have kids get help, they're usually back with us within sometimes 24 hours is all they're given. So what is happening with that, and what can we do, or what can we advocate to help that system?
Well, for a short time, we actually had a time period where human services, where we utilized human services for therapy, and we had a time where we had no one that was available. So we actually had people out of Fargo coming over to help us, and that was quite a challenge. And then we actually had to, we had a situation at the Human Services with some kind of a licensing, and we had to utilize the state hospital. and get some support from them for a while. And that went on for about 8 months. So that was a real challenge, trying to run drug court and get the services that the kids needed. Right now, we're probably been the best that we've had as far as the human services, getting the supports. But as far as, it is a challenge. Yeah, it's probably more than just drug court. There's more things to talk about at a later date. There's something that we could spend a long time on with the supports. That is one of our frustrations at drug court, is with the mental health piece with the students that we're dealing with, because there is a lot of mental health with substance abuse. We had one student that we had a tough time because we went through the situation, and drug court wasn't for that person. And as we went through what that person needed, we didn't have it in the state. It used to be the CAS unit up at the state hospital. That's where that person should have been, and that was unfortunate. So right now, we've got a place up in Williston that seems to be the place right now that's the place to go. But it's pretty full up there, and that's quite a distance. That's like going to Minneapolis for us. So, but that is a challenge. But that's another topic to talk about. But we do feel it there. We do get frustrated at drug court too, trying to get the supports for that.
Thank you, Jason. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. I would assume that this is probably one of the most heartbreaking and rewarding parts of your job. Is there a transition? I'm thinking of, 17, 18-year-olds who may start drug court. And then is there anything that we tie them to as they either graduate or leave the system?
The thing about drug court, what it is trying to teach them different strategies. I mean, that's the main thing. And trying to help the family with different strategies, because the support of the family is huge. I can go through a lot of successes, and I can go through a lot of kids that did fail. I can go through and look on our site on Stetson County jail roster, and I could see a few, but there are a lot of kids that are quite successful right now. I shouldn't say kids, but adults that are out there right now that have families and have good jobs. And just a month and a half ago, I had a student that came back from, he was in the service, came back, and he came in and he apologized for calling me a bad term for getting me set up for this. And he said that he was on his way down to Florida, and he was going down to seminary school. So he was pretty appreciative of that. And then I've got just off the top of my head, I've got a girl that she went on and got RN. So there's a lot of success out there. You just had to get into the right, just get some supports, and that's what this is all about. So, but we do need help. We need more than just our team. We need people outside helping us out, and that means once they just need to talk outside. When they're outside that group, when they're slipping or they need some help, they just need to talk to somebody. So,
Diane.
I wanted to say I'm quite involved in the world of reinventing recovery. And these drug courts, I want the public to know, are just vital to our community. And they haven't been around forever. For a town this size, we are very fortunate to have both a juvenile and an adult drug court. And the adult has only been here 4 years, the juvenile a little longer, but they are making things happen in our community, and they're doing it in a beautiful way, and also in a very strict, zero-tolerance way that the community would appreciate. And there's a lot of success stories, lots of them. And one thing that you can tell as a mentor, as you can tell young people, is that a team is assembling to try to save your life. And that doesn't happen every day. And that's what's going on here. And I happened to sit through the juvenile drug court about a month ago with Judge Lefevre, and they're doing a tremendous job. So I really appreciate your part of this. And I know that we have a pretty terrific problem up at the high school, so I like it that we've got some resources here in this town to try to help. And I'm sorry to hear about Clay County, but everybody just needs to keep trying, and these young people need our support and our help. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other
Else?
comments or questions by the board? Thank you, John, for your time tonight.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So we're going to pause the regular school board meeting here to move into our public demographic planning meeting. And Dr. Leck, would you go through each section? And we do not have anyone in the audience for comment, but if someone would come in, we would allow them our typical time frame of 3 to 5 minutes for comment.
All right,
So I call the meeting to order, I guess.
thank you. So for those asking the question, what is this? So about a decade ago, the legislature put a requirement to have these 3- and 5-year planning meetings. So there are meetings that exist for the public to participate around academic and extracurricular programming, instructional and administrative staffing, facility needs and utilization, and district tax levies. So the requirement is to do this in every even year by June 30th. And so that's what we're doing here in this meeting. We actually do something similar, and we've done it historically for quite a period of time in the superintendent's annual report. It's not quite like this, but it is a similar type of document. So a lot of the information you're going to hear from me is very similar, and the public might hear, is similar to when we have conversations around the superintendent's annual report. But our requirement is, well, I think how this might work best is I'll present some information and some general feedback as I see it in each of these areas, and we'll pause and have some conversation around them. And then if, as Dr. Larson said, there isn't any members of the public here now, but if there were to be some, then at the end of the presentation, when we are through all of the 4, then allow an opportunity for the public to comment. And so I'll take the information that we have, excuse me, in this meeting, and I will add it to this planning document, and that'll be shared then at our June meeting, which will become the public document that we'll use. Okay? So questions about this so far? Okay. So you'll see we do a little bit more. We provided a little bit more information than what's required in this presentation. There's 6 appendices that are linked into this document. So if people access it online, there are 6 different ones. Appendix A, for example, is that annual superintendent report that I've referenced. So that's something that we do every year. So the most recent version of that is Appendix A. Another source of information that I use quite a bit, and for those that haven't seen it, Insights is a great dashboard that the state of North Dakota provides, and it provides information on academic progress, student data, post-secondary education data, district environment, special education performance, and staffing for the state, but then also drills down to district levels and building levels. It's a great source for information if you are interested. If you are a nerd like me and you like this kind of data, it's a great place to go, and I would encourage anybody to check out that Insights dashboard. And that's also linked directly to the Jamestown Public Schools Insight dashboard. So hard copies of this report and any other report or appendix that's referenced, if anybody wants them, they can just reach out. I'd be happy to send them those documents. So the first that I'll talk about, mission and vision and strategic goals, that's listed as Appendix B. It drives the decisions that we make, so I thought it was important to include our mission, vision, and strategic plan. I won't go through it. They are the same as what we adopted in 2019. I will say the pandemic put a little bit of a wrench, like it did in many things, but one of the things that impacted for our district is annual review of the strategic plan and revision of the strategic plan. How we developed this plan was to consider it every year and make change every year, and we haven't done that. We need to do that. My plan for a revision would be at our annual meeting in July to have this go through our executive team, then would flow through our board committee on strategic planning, and then come back to this board for a revision approval in July. That's the hope. But I think that's something that, I shouldn't say I think, that is something that hasn't happened that we really should have and should be doing. It's just the resource of time. But I think it needs to be a commitment that we get completed by our annual meeting in July. But I'm going to just pause if there's questions, strategic plan. Okay. Moving down into enrollment trends, we've had a lot of conversations around this lately. But one of the things I will draw your attention to is the chart. If you look at where we are currently and where we are projected in 26, 27, it's significantly lower. We are seeing a shift in a trend to lower enrollments. When we had we've actually in my 9 years have had 2 educational demography studies. And in both of those, they projected around 160 enrolled kindergarten students per year as the average. We haven't really been anywhere close to that in 9 years. We've had 3 years that were at or above that standard in 2014, 15, 2017, 18, and 2019, 20. We were above the 160. But in every other year, we've been really pretty significantly lower than that. And really our average outside of those 3 high watermark years has been about 140. And so as we look to that shift, that standard of 160, that is not anywhere that we're going to be near. And we need to start thinking about how that impacts us as a district. If we aren't planning for 160 and we're seeing closer to 140, or in this year significantly lower than that, then we need to think about how does that impact our district? How does that impact our footprint in the community? And I think that's a conversation that'll come up a little bit later in enrollment in facilities as well. But really throughout this whole presentation. But you might ask the question, why? What's happening? Why are we seeing less than that 160? Well, one is it's a demography study. It's a projection. That's one answer. But we're also seeing other factors that we don't have data on, so we don't collect specific data on this, but I believe that some of the factors are we have expansion of some of the other educational institutions that have, in our community. That's going to impact, and that's not something our demographer would have necessarily seen or been able to project some of that. The COVID pandemic, I think, is a nice catch-all for a lot of things that we don't know how they've impacted, but has it had an impact? Perhaps. Greater numbers of families choosing to utilize competing options outside of JPS, that's a lot of options. Private schools, home education, open enrollment or tuition agreements to neighboring school districts. Those are all impacts that can bring that 160, 140 down or bring that average down. The interesting thing is when you look at census data, there really isn't a big change from where we were in 2010 to where we are in 2020. And some people might say, well, yes, but we don't have as many students. But even in the areas of the students, or persons under 5 and persons under 18, that's remained, from a percentage standpoint, pretty consistent. So the students are really the same as what we felt they were in 2010, but our enrollment is decreasing. So there's something there that we need to consider. So again, if you look at the chart, if you look at our K through 5 enrollment currently, that's 875. Just to give you some context, when I came here, we were fairly consistently right at that 1,000. So even in the span of those 9 years, now we've seen that decrease from about 1,000 to now 875. Project that into 2026, 27, that's about 800. So even the planning from 875 to 800 is a lot, but that's, the model for what we've been, our footprint in this community has been based on 1,000. And now if you look at 2026, 27, you're looking at 800. That's obviously a significantly lower number that we're going to have to project to. We see a bubble. You'll notice that the difference isn't much in the high school right now. There isn't a significant difference between what's current and what's projected in the high school. When this year's 8th grade class graduates, you will see a significant difference in our district level enrollment. That bubble comes at that point. And then you'll start to see the carryover. If you look as an example from the middle school at 524 currently to 460, that's going to continue through the high school, and you'll see lower levels at all of our levels, and not just in the elementary where we currently see it the most. And so again, I keep coming back to what's our footprint and what should our footprint be. Those are hard conversations that as a district we're going to need to have, because the enrollment simply doesn't support the old paradigm for us as it stands right now. And like I said, there's really a lot of things that couldn't have been projected. Our demographer, they have statistical analysis, and they're very good at what they do. There's things that they couldn't have considered. You know, I'll just give an example. St. John's Academy expanding from 6th grade to 7th and 8th grade. They wouldn't have known that. That impacts. And I by no means mean that as something that St. John's Academy shouldn't have done. They need to work their organization as they do. And I applaud them for thinking, you know, being forward thinking. But that's an impact to the district. And we have to consider how that impact, or how that enrollment shift does impact our district. And so I did build in some change from, I think some shift, I think it was 20% of that enrollment at 6th grade into the middle level at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. But that's significantly less than what we had typically seen at that level. So I'm going to pause just a second to see if there are, I believe that I've talked about everything in enrollment considerations, but I'll just pause for questions if there are any.
Any questions from the board? Okay, go ahead.
I'm just looking at, you know, the data you presented, and it's very compelling that what will be happening with enrollment. Is there a way that, I don't know, but I think some kind of way to keep communication open with families if and when decisions might be made that are hard? Or I remember years ago, it never came to fruition, but there was a committee that at that time was looking at enrollments. This was way back with Dr. Smetty, and it had looked and came up with recommendations of grade level schools, and it really moved almost as forward as it could at that point, but then collapsed. But it had involvement from all schools, a lot of buy-in, so that if we're going to make difficult decisions, people feel like they're being heard and communicated with, and especially so that they see this data like we're seeing it and looking at it and thinking of its implications. I mean, anytime you look at things like that, there's a lot of emotion, probably more emotion than sometimes, you know, intellectual engagement with it because of how important those neighborhood schools are to the families.
So we did create or kind of outline an enrollment and facilities task force. It just hasn't been operationalized. You know, what this data, what you're telling me is exactly what that committee would look at, representation across buildings, staff, community, and it's time to operationalize that, and that's one recommendation or consideration that we really need to, as a district, commit resources to, is to have that enrollment and facility task force get to work and dig in and see what we really want to be doing again and analyze what our footprint is now and what it should be moving forward. Does that sort of answer your question?
Just having been a person who probably put in 100 hours on said committee, we'd also want to look at where these things tend to fall apart and learn from what went well last time and what didn't go well when that happened, because, you know, at any point it can unravel really quickly and for reasons you wouldn't even think of. And I just think the communication part probably was a place where it fell apart there too, where that happened. And also I just think at that time, just having not been a board member, but being a different member of it, that'll be one of those times where we really, if we make a decision, need to be one voice, one vision, and really be together. And I'll also just speak, having lived through a time where we made, I'm old. I lived through Franklin's closure, and it was, any of these things are just really hard. And the work that goes into it will have to be, and I'm not talking about closing anything, I don't want that, but anytime we're talking about things like what we're talking about now, it's very difficult.
Thank you.
Very.
Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, great information. I'm a big believer in, to me, this is huge. This is something that I agree with. We do need to devote time and resources to. And there are competing situations. I do feel that it would be worth our time to take a look at this and include the task force. I just want us to make sure we're focusing on making sure that JPS is the place where we want our kids to be and people want their kids to be, and we're all in agreement on that. So to me, this is very important. I'm glad that it's going to be a priority in our district because some of these trends are very concerning. And it's because we feel that we can provide them with the best option. That's where we need to get to. So there will be some difficult discussions, I'm sure, that are going to be had. But yeah, I mean, I'm just glad that we're going to focus on this.
Thank you, Jason. Any other comments? I'd like to just make two comments. One, if the public or the board hasn't had a chance to look at that Insights dashboard, it is actually really easy to use, and there's a lot of information in there, and I think it's a lot of the information I've looked at. Our district is measuring up quite well, and so if you have a chance to do that, and just the comment on the enrollment, of course, and you have the committee, but just a reminder that our funding model is kind of per pupil, and so as we're looking at budgets in the future, those are also considerations. Dan, go ahead.
One thing we might want to consider is, do our metrics for effectiveness accurately reflect what the community wants to make us competitive? What makes us competitive against all the other options? And do our metrics and things that we measure ourselves on, is that accurate to making us competitive?
Thank you, Dan. Jason, go ahead.
Sorry, I did forget to mention one other component that I think is relevant is more so than recently, or more recently than in the past, perhaps, public education is taking a beating for a variety of things. Some fair, some not. So I just think that it's worth bringing up here that, public education is facing some challenges right now, and we're going to work through them the best we can. Just reminding folks that, to be fair sometimes, when they're looking at our schools, and that, we're all doing the best we can.
Thank you, Jason. Any other comments or questions before we move on to the next section? Okay, thank you. Dr. Luck, continue.
Okay, starting on page 7, we have the North Dakota State Assessments. This is similar data to what you see in the annual assessment board education that's provided typically in June, and the annual superintendent's report. The one caveat I will say is in 1920 we didn't have assessments. That was our pandemic year, and so it's unfortunate to have a gap year like that when we're trying to do some comparisons. But as I've shared before, really when I look, cut scores for proficiency are set where they are, and they're relatively arbitrary from my perspective, and it's set at the state, and they say this is proficiency or this means proficiency. But I often look most, and I think that provides us that levels of that proficiency level, that number, that percentage gives us some piece of information, but it doesn't give us all of the information. I also then look to how we compare to the state, and that's usually a nice benchmark for how I like to consider. And so fairly consistently, across all grade levels, and in ELA, math, and in science, as a district, we compare very favorably to the benchmark of the state. We of course want to be better. You know, we are striving to be better every year. I think the pandemic, you know, did impact us. I think you can look at 2018, and of course that's, I mean, think of it in a vacuum, of course. It's one group, it's not, you know, I think we want to be careful to how we're, you know, the level we look at that, but I think it does give us some comparison to see that there's a difference between 18-19 and 2021. But I can also share that things are escalating back to, you know, normalizing fairly quickly. I'll just share just a few examples from some data that we looked at last week. We had, I don't know if this has ever happened before, but we had a student in our science assessment, he got 100%, got them all right. I don't know if that's ever happened before. Every question, 100%. So we had 14 students in their writing assessment at the high school had perfect scores. You have, I think the number is, of 10th graders in ELA was 78% at the high school in 10th grade. Those are the numbers, just the numbers that we looked at recently, just in that grade level or in that band of the high school. Those are all really exciting pieces of information. And I look at the writing, I look at the ELA, which has been something we've looked to improve. And I think the commitment that we've made through literacy, our literacy grant, and that commitment to instructional coaches and literacy, it is starting to show some dividends. And I think that's a good commitment that we've made and something that we need to continue to support. But I think good news, and I think I guess my point is we're rebounding, I think, from that outlier year in 2021. If you look at the NAEP assessment, that's a national assessment. Those scores haven't been released yet, so we don't have the 2021 data to compare. And ACT, and I've shared this information before, this is the last year that you'll see this report in which you're going to see a slight bump. The reason for that is it's no longer required. And as I've said to this body before, you know, it's important when you look at those district and state averages that you're comparing them to districts and states in which the ACT was required for all. If you just take, there's 18. I think there were 18, maybe now there's 17 states that all students were required to take the ACT. Well, just, you know, common sense will tell you those scores are going to be a little bit lower than those that only some do ACT or SAT as a requirement. So you could expect to see that go up just a bit as you're only now assessing those that are choosing to take the ACT instead of every student required to take the ACT, and you'll be able to better compare, I think, how we do against the rest of the state, again, those that don't require it, don't require the ACT. We also provide work keys, and that information is provided to you as well, and that's stayed pretty consistently at the 100% range for those that choose to take it. So I'm going to pause. Well, I'm going to jump to approval, accreditation, curricular offerings too, just noting that I don't have much to share there. We haven't had a 5-year reevaluation. I talked about that in the past, that was pushed. Now we won't have that for another 2 years. That 5-year reeval becomes a 7-year. The pandemic pushed off all of those as well. And so the powerful practices, opportunities for improvement, and improvement priorities that were provided by what was Advanced Ed, now it's Cognia, have remained unchanged because we haven't done another assessment on those. But with that, I would stand for questions in any of those areas.
Any questions from the board?
Sorry, I didn't point out Appendix D, which has all of the classes for Jamestown High School and Jamestown Middle School. That's Appendix D. You know, I'd like to point out that I think, you know, as a district and the board, you've heard the varying changes that have come around from the middle level and the high school course changes. You know, from my perspective, I think JPS has been very responsive to changing environments and interests for students, whether that's in career and tech ed, which a lot of that change has been, or at the middle level, a focus on study skills, which we felt was a needed change. And I think that the staff has been very responsive to what course offerings should be and could be. to ensure that we are providing a relevant opportunity, but also one that's interesting to our students as well. So now I will pause for questions.
Any questions from the board? Aaron?
Could you just expand a little bit on the opportunities for improvement there that you described in there? The effectiveness of the initiatives and how we evaluate ourselves there, and then the student engagement results?
So when the review team comes in, they do their own engagement. It's called the Elliott. And so they come in and provide engagement scores. We provide engagement scores, and they were suggesting that we take a look at the level to which students are engaged and not just ritually compliant in schools, just doing what they're told to do, that they're actually engaged. And they suggested that we do more work in student engagement and focus on student engagement. You'll see that come out a lot in the different professional development that's been offered for our staff to focus on different engagement strategies that the teachers are using in the classroom. And I think from my perspective, from my observations, those have been very effective when that's occurred. Yep. Correct. And they're just talking about the Elliott scores, and what we were seeing were somewhat different, but those are subjective. They come in and they're in a classroom. And I've been a part of those advanced ed or now cognitive reviews. And you're in a classroom for a period of time. You see what you see, you score what you see, and then you look at the scores. And there was a lot of differences between what was happening in classrooms. In some classrooms, Elliott scores were very high. In others, they were very low, or not. I should say very low. They were lower than the other examples. And so they just thought we should focus on building capacity in how we're engaging our students across the board. So there was less of a difference between those Elliott scores, even though they recognized that they were subjective and just a snapshot in time. Your other, okay, so what the review team, to my recollection, what they felt at that time was that we had an initiative over here, an initiative over here, and one over here, and they didn't centralize. And so based on that opportunity for improvement, that's when we restructured our district school improvement committee to be more connected with the different initiatives that come through. So when we have an initiative or something new happening, it's connected in some way to the district school improvement committee. So the district school improvement committee has members that serve on those committees as well, those planning committees, or have discussions around something different that we need to do. You heard from staff from the standards-based team. Those are heard and discussed at district school improvement committee, so they're not disjointed from the work of the district. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So where are these initiatives all coming from? Are these internally driven? Are they primarily externally driven that we have to adopt? Or can we be selective on some of these initiatives so we don't have to necessarily realize the full burden?
So a little bit of both, but even at this time, when this review occurred, we're going to be driven by our strategic plan. And so that's primarily where those initiatives come from, are supported or directed from the strategic plan. So some of them are requirements, things that come from the state that are external that say thou shalt do this type of training for this many hours every 2 years. But for the most part, things are driven by the strategic plan.
So that's something that we control internally here.
Correct.
And we can manage that and.
Correct.
Okay.
And I can just from experience, being I'm sort of on the advanced ed for quite some years, and maybe off and on a couple of times, but there's just more intentionally, it's kind of coalesced there, and things are really tied together. And I think Jason and is it Gail, you're in advanced ed. When we go to those meetings, I think you really see that, well, the professional development in this covers this. And so it's just, to me, it's seemed far more intentional and streamlined, purposeful, and yeah, so that's just. And then any other questions or about these areas? Okay. Move on to the next area, please.
Okay, starting on page 11, you see student services and success indicators. Most of that, rather than take information and try to plot it, I provided more information in the appendices. Actually, I think it was just Appendix E for the most part, but that gives an example in student services and success indicators. Just are we providing activities for our students? And I would say in Jamestown, I don't know if there's much we don't provide. We provide pretty much every activity that anybody could want to be a part of, and I think that's a commitment that the district has made and should continue to make, to provide as many co-curricular athletics, academic opportunities as possible. So I would just draw your attention to Appendix E to provide most of those examples of curricular and co-curricular. We do have counseling as is required by North Dakota Century Code to meet those ratios that is in place. Online courses completed, 239 in this year have been completed. We don't have I checked no for early childhood education, but we do have early childhood education for special education students. But in my mind, the question is asking, do you provide early childhood education for all students? Special education services are required. So I didn't put that in there, although you could say 15 to 20 if you needed a number for early childhood students. Gifted and talented program, as you heard, we do have that. We're making some shifts to that, again, trying to be responsive to what we see. Kindergarten, we do have all day, every day kindergarten. In library media, we do have library media for all. I'm sorry, it looks like I didn't update the enrollments there, but that's for all students. A school resource officer is a recommendation I'll be bringing up in a second, or at least something to discuss that I'll be bringing up in a second. But we do have a school resource officer that covers K through 12. We don't have a school social worker, although we did expand on our school counseling, I think to fill that gap. And we also have some mental health therapy services that are available at 3 days a week. You have a question?
And we're just referring to high school because isn't Carrie Solis a social worker with?
Correct.
Correct, so we're.
Yep. Special education, as we know, we meet that indicator as well. We have a student performance strategist, which is required for our elementary levels, and we do have that. Transportation is provided. So for student interventions, I've included information on, we have adopted the MTSS model. We've enhanced that for behavior. You've heard that acronym MTSS, and it just struck me as we were hearing that presentation that I don't know if we've talked about what MTS, so we talk in acronyms all the time in education, and multi-tiered system of supports. And so we have that academically, that's MTSS. MTSSB, that's a framework for behavior. So multi-tiered systems of supports for behavior as well. And I think we've seen, a great deal of success ensuring that our students have what they need in math and reading academically with MTSS, and we're seeing we're seeing benefits for analyzing and looking at MTSSB as well. And we've adopted a K through 12 social and emotional learning curriculum and programs. I'm going to move on to page 13. Number of students that we've retained, that's pretty consistent, and historically has been at 10 or lower for students that are retained, and I'm talking about kindergarten at that level. The dropout rate, and this was from Insights. If you look at the district, we are at or below the state average for dropout, as reported on the Insights. Attendance rates, we're pretty consistent with what the state average is, and that's really pretty high if you look across the state and compare to other states. A 96% attendance rates. In some states, you get to 75, 78%, and you're feeling really, really good about the work that you're doing. And in North Dakota, there's just a commitment to education that's somewhat different, and so we see that attendance rate much, much higher. Chronic absenteeism, this is something that I do believe the board needs to have board education on again, but this is something that I take great pride in. how we compare in chronic absenteeism, and this is purposeful. I would love to have Mark Stillwell back before the board and talking about SARB and the Student Attendance Review Board process, what we do to create and to limit, I should say, to create relationships with home earlier, and to ensure that the school is seen as a partner in a child's education at home, to decrease student absenteeism, especially chronic absenteeism. If students aren't here, they can't learn. And we will see that directly related to assessment scores and their performance and mastery if we move to a standards-based. And the proof's in the pudding. If you look at chronic absenteeism, over the last 3 years, the state average is 12%, or what they define as 12% on insights. We're at 7. 6 to 11, 7 to 15%. And in the years of the pandemic, half of the level of chronic absenteeism. And I think it'd be valuable to have Mr. Stillwell and some members of some counselors, the members of that SARB team, come in and talk about the work that they do. Because instead of just dropping the hammer on families, we're trying to have conversations with families when it gets to 5 days of absence. You know, what are the barriers to getting the child to school? How can we help? How are we a partner? And it doesn't come until that 10th absence, and then we're starting to have a conversation with the administrator about, okay, well, this is what we need to do now. But there's been a lot of communication along the way. And I know people don't always like to get those SARB letters, but they happen for a reason, and they're successful. And I think our chronic absenteeism has been down significantly as a result. Suspensions and expulsions, that's stayed relatively consistent, 48 in 2018-19, 45, 19-20, 39, 2021, but I think that's all relatively consistent. Graduation rate stayed fairly consistent, a little bit higher than the state average. Graduates receiving the alternate diploma, you know, we're looking at students that are looking at the Blue Jay Academy, or what we now call the Blue Jay Academy. Our projected graduation rate around 88% is what we're projecting, with 5 receiving alternative diplomas. The senior survey is data that we collect every year from our seniors. And this is what they know at the time that they leave. So, you know, we don't do follow-up surveys when they've been gone for 4 years to see, well, what did you actually do? Because some that say, oh, I'm going to go into the workforce, they go to college. And some saying, yeah, I'm going to try a 4-year university, go to a trade school. Some that say they want to go to a 4-year university, join the workforce. But this is what we know at the time. And that's been different data, and I don't know what I'd like to dig into that a little bit more to see if this is a blip on the radar screen or if this is something indicative of something else. But we're seeing a decrease of students interested in a 4-year college. We've seen ebbs and flows on 2-year college, VOTEC, a decrease in military and an increase in what I called employed, other, or undeclared. So I'm not sure what that means, but I know that that's what's reported on those senior surveys. So things I think we need to continue to do, or considerations in student services and success, we need to keep doing what we're doing at the secondary level and assessing what our student needs are, so we keep the courses that students are interested in, that we help, that are relevant and engaging, that help them to be choice ready so they can make that choice to whatever challenging pathway they choose. If they are choosing to go into the military, if they are choosing to go to a 2-year school, if they're choosing to go to a 4-year school, that it is relevant and challenging and robust all through. But we need to make sure that we're continuing to provide those offerings that are engaging at the extracurricular level and at the curricular level. We've targeted absences. Again, I've said I think that's been really successful. I'm proud of that, and I know that the SARB team is proud of the work that they've done. And if you hear them talk, they're not happy. They're pleased with what's happened, but they want more. You know, and they keep talking about how could we get 1 more %? How could we do this? And the work that they do is really outstanding, and I'm very appreciative of them. We've hired an additional secondary counselor that's split between the high school and the middle school. We've used ESSER funding to do that. We know that that's a need. We know that it's also a need. We've used ESSER to hire mental health therapists at 3 days a week. We need to find a way to be at 5. I think that needs to be a goal, and I think we have that through some ARP funding at special ed. We've looked to target that, and I've already had some conversations with the village. If ARP funds through the unit can pay for that perhaps we can look to 5 days. And I think that's an important commitment that we need to make. We're servicing 38 kids, but we've got, I think, 42 on a wait list. And that's not all of them, because I think our counselors stop after a while, rather than, continuing to recommend and doing the intake process. They're just holding off because there aren't spots available. So I think there's more that we can do there. I'm very proud of the work that we've done in literacy through our 2 grants. They're both $2.5 million in grants that we brought into the district to support literacy. That's something we should be proud of. I think the work is done really well. I think our instructional literacy coaches have done outstanding work supporting data and doing the work that they've committed to doing for birth all the way through grade 12. So we're happy about that. I talked about the survey already. The other that I haven't talked about yet is the SRO. We just had interviews for a school resource officer for one. If you talk to other school districts that are our size or close to our size, they think we're really touching the surface to have one SRO. It's so much to spread around, and our needs are increasing. We see that in our mental health therapy numbers that I've just given you. I think that we need to have a conversation about what 2 SROs would look like, and could we support that as a district? If we can do that and focus on one in the elementary level, one in the secondary level, what happens sometimes is we either lose out on education, that preventative education, we lose out on the relationship building, or we lose out on the services and the expertise that gets needed, when something happens at, let's say, the high school level, or if we find something that we need to address at the middle school level, or wherever it happens, when there's a call for service. Something gets missed, and we need to be able to fill all those buckets. And with one person doing all that work, they struggle to do it, and they struggle to do a good job. And if we had one at the elementary level that could cover 5 buildings, and one at the secondary level that could cover the middle school and the high school campus, I think you'd see more value from that work. And it's just very hard, and I worry about the SRO burnout. I just had a conversation with Chief Ettinger the other day about that very thing, that when you have to do everything, when you have to fill all 3 of those buckets, that's a lot of work to do. And are we burning those SROs out? Or are we not allowing them to build relationships with kids or do those education services with kids like DARE that we know are so important long term? But if they're just doing everything a little bit instead of diving deep into more of it, I think the impact of the SRO is going to be limited to calls for service. And I don't think that's what we ultimately want. And so I think having a conversation about SROs and can we do more there, I think is important too. So with that long-winded section, I will pause for questions and take a drink.
Jason? Or go ahead, Jason, then Gail, sorry. Go ahead.
Back to the senior survey. Could you define what you mean there by undeclared? We have employed, other, undeclared. Did they just not answer it, or they were
They don't know.
Okay.
I didn't want to say undecided.
Okay, just a suggestion, would it make sense to the employed part, measure that separately, and then other undeclared? I just think it might tell us something if we knew a percentage that was planning to join the workforce right out of high school. Just a thought.
We can certainly bring that up to the counselors. This is the survey that the counselors provide to us, but we can certainly bring that up.
Gail, go ahead.
I'd like to reiterate what you said about the SRO. I mean, even back in the days when I was an elementary counselor, we had a good relationship at that time with Officer Gluttony, and when tough situations would come up with kids and families, that relationship was invaluable. Just, there's no dollar amount you can put on how it would help, especially some really difficult situations. It's very important. And I mean, and kids would still talk about it when they were in high school. Remember when Officer Gluttony, so very great idea.
Thank you, Gail. Jason?
Just to echo that, the family piece to me would be huge. There would be hopefully more time to not only develop relationships with students, but, you know, more family support too. So that really, to me, would make it worth it.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Keep moving on.
Okay, last one, district financial data, everybody's favorite topic, numbers. I do kind of like it, but district financial data, what we have is general fund revenues, expenditures, and balances over the last 5 completed years. 5 completed years, expenditures per student, mill levies during those same time periods. And one thing I just draw your attention to, and I know the board is well aware of this, but the impact of the pandemic is shown here also. The difference comes in ESSER funding and what the level of federal programming, federal dollars that we've received. So you see these balances that are, you know, really outside the norm, and you'll see it even at a greater level. And this year you see, whoa, you know, those are big balances, and how are we carrying over that level of balance? Well, that's federal dollars that's committed somewhere else, but that looks like an outlier year, and it is. Because of the influx of federal dollars, and you can see the revenues spike considerably, expenditures stay relatively the same. Well, why is that? Well, it's the influx of federal dollars. We're doing exactly what, you know, ESSER allows is, you know, we're claiming those allowable expenses, and then as we shared in that flow chart a number of meetings ago, you know, we're targeting where we're going to use those dollars. Are they new programs? Are they general fund flow-throughs, things like that? Expenditures per pupil has stayed, it jumped up a little bit. Again, that's not surprising in this completed year, considering you have that influx of federal dollars. You're going to see slightly higher expenditures per pupil. But I would draw your attention to the years without that influx of federal dollars. That expenditure per ADM stays pretty consistent. So what that means is we're being fairly efficient with the dollars that we do receive, and staying very consistent with the services that we have, that we're providing. If you look at the mill levies, the bottom column on page 15 really stayed, you know, pretty consistent since 2017-18, with the addition of 2 mills for our special assessment in 21-22. That's the only thing that's changed, is our special assessments increased, so our levy increased as well. But we've stayed right around that 99 at 100, and now we're at 102. So we've stayed very consistent from a levy standpoint in our community. So looking at page 16, the top chart there shows our state, federal, other revenue sources. We know, and this is to a point that Dr. Larson made earlier, that we can't say enough, when enrollment is going to matter. When you look at state, and when we say state revenue, that's per pupil. That's per pupil funding. And if we're seeing a significant decrease in the pupil, the number of pupils, that means the state per pupil amount, that revenue amount that's a fairly large percentage of what we bring in for revenue. And as the student change and the student numbers change, that funding is going to change too. So that's a concern. You can see, and it's absolutely something that this board and central office needs to continue to monitor. And you can also see the representation of that, the federal funding increase. What's much more consistent for us is if you look at 18-19, that 1.8 million, 1.5 million, even that, to be honest, is high because we're talking about grants, federal grants there too. Other revenue sources stay relatively consistent. But you see the big spike in federal funds, and that's related to ESSER, as we've said. So just getting down to some of the considerations. We've been very consistent with the general fund miscellaneous, special reserve, tuition, building fund levy requests. Outside of the special assessment, that really hasn't changed. much, and it hasn't changed really anything in a couple of years outside of that. The pandemic has really had a significant impact on us, which we are well aware of. You know, from 1920, some of those factors aren't just the additional funding. I think we also need to remember we had an extended closure in spring of 2020, but we were held harmless in terms of state funding, which was a significant portion, held harmless, and actually increased funding at the federal level. So we saw an increase in projected revenues during those times, but it was also less expense. We didn't have the same level of transportation costs, for example, you know, utility costs, all those little things, they add up over time. So we have used ESSER funding for a lot of different areas related to the pandemic. Counseling services, I referenced, mental health therapy services, additional summer school or opening up summer school for students. And we've also earmarked some of those funds for longer term needs, which I'll talk about in a bit. But we've also struggled in the pandemic with filling all of our spots. And that's another impact to our budget. We've had, for example, para positions that we budget for that we haven't been able to fill all year. We've had that as an example in teachers. We haven't been able to fill. And we're struggling with finding teachers. We're struggling with finding paras, food service, custodians. All of those are areas that we have to budget for because we know what we need. We know what the right size for staffing is, but we can't fill them, so that impacts our budget, our bottom line as well. So we did, and I'll talk about this a little bit more when we get into facilities, but we also had an updated iteration of the capital projects plan, which includes a transfer. If you look back to, you know, those larger numbers in balances and the federal dollars that we have for revenue sources, you'll also see, as the board committed to $5.5 million, transferring that into our building fund, and that'll be coming at a future date too. So with that, I'll pause for questions in finance as well.
Questions, comments by the board? And I just, yep, our declining enrollment, especially even the projected kindergarten enrollment isn't close. So just even, these can have really quick impacts on us because it'll already impact us this next year for budgets. Any other comments? Okay, Jason, go ahead.
Did I miss it? The staffing, administrative staff, is central office staff included anywhere in this report?
No, it does. No. I was just following the template there. I guess we can certainly add that. Unless you want me to move into staffing? Other questions? Okay. So if you look at staffing, we've talked about the footprint of what we have. This does not represent that. We haven't made decisions on lots of different areas or seen how that enrollment impacts us. I simply included the same projections throughout in staffing. That's the footprint we have right now, and it's the footprint we're projecting through 2024. But I do think we have to have, at some point, a conversation about what does that look like. If we have 200 students less than we did 10 years ago, at an elementary level, for example, what does that look like? We need to have a conversation about it. And I mean that prioritizing what's best for kids. Efficiency is important too, but what's best for kids? And they don't have to be mutually exclusive conversations. We have to have a conversation about what's efficient and what's the best thing we can do, and providing the best quality education. So I don't have any comments there outside of the fact that the reality is we need to have conversations about what level of staffing is appropriate for our enrollment. But with that, are there other questions?
Any questions by the board?
I have facilities yet too. So I've included facilities. Well, it's a 20-page document, you know, you have to, we want to make sure that everything gets its due course. Facility planning, one of the items that I've included here is all of our facilities, when they were built, their additions, their size, their site size, their capacity, and we consider capacity based on usable space, usable classrooms that we have, not just when we say capacity, it's based on number of usable classrooms, our enrollment, and what percentage of that exists based on our current enrollment. So, and I won't touch on this a lot because I know we've spent a lot of time as a board and in the public talking about our capital projects plan, but I do think it's important to continue to come back to the fact that we do have a plan. And we do have a facility plan that spans 10 years. And we need to look at what those costs are. We have 7 schedules, and I think it's a pretty robust schedule, or a pretty robust plan. It has 7 schedules for asbestos, building repairs, which is obviously the biggest, sites, roofs, which is the next biggest, security and safety and equipment. So if you add up that 10-year span from 2021 to 2031, you have, or 2030, excuse me, over 5 elementary buildings, 1 middle school, 1 high school campus, so that's including JVCTC and the transition house now, you're looking at $36 million in needs. So even when we make that commitment from ESSER to, into the capital projects plan and infuse those dollars, we're still significantly below that 10-year goal. And you know that we can raise about $800,000 a year from our building fund that has lots of different needs beyond just this, or I should say some other needs. We're paying bond debt and things like that. But we aren't getting to that $36 million, and so we need to prioritize. And that means we can't do everything every year for every building. We have to prioritize what those needs are. And one of the other things that I think is really great about the capital projects plan is if you look at the, there's a column that does costs per square foot, so we can talk about what that $36 million and what does that mean? Well, we have ranges in there, which makes sense. They go from our newest building to our oldest building. Our newest building costs $21 or a little bit over $21 per square foot, and our oldest building costs about would cost about $148 per square foot. It's a pretty significant differences, but those are all things that as we plan for that footprint that we need to consider. So the facility committee reviews those needs, and we update the capital projects plan or bring this to this board, that capital projects plan revision every year. So that continues to be a living document that guides us, and as we can infuse more money into that plan, we need to. ESSER is the best example that I can give of that. And again, we're looking at targeting out of ESSER about $7.3 million into this long-term facility need, and that's I'm sorry, not just in ESSER, but a total in that area, not just of ESSER. But some of that comes from the 2020 certificates of indebtedness that we used. That was a refinance of bond that we used to support the Hanson Athletic Complex and Erstad Practice Field. So that remaining 1.4, almost $1.5 million also was infused as part of that $7.3 million. And then that general fund transfer of 5.5 comes from ESSER. And so what we've been able to save in ESSER related, or in the general fund related to the ESSER program. So again, in facilities, this isn't a new conversation. We've known that we have to have these conversations related to our facilities as well, and I think that goes back to the conversation we had about enrollment. We need to put in place that enrollment and facilities task force that can study this footprint and help us make some decisions in terms of what the future for JPS looks like. So now I'm done.
Any
With that
questions
part.
from the board? Comments, questions? Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, just to comment on the, specifically the Washington school there. We've looked at that in the facilities committee and really running status quo on that building is really not a good use of taxpayer dollars. About $147 per square foot is really, that's approaching new build construction costs just for maintenance. And so I think it's not jumping to any conclusions here. But I think we as a district, we got to look at something different, whatever that is. I don't know what it is. I'm not going to suggest anything, but it's running status quo on that is not where we need to be. So just to comment on that, and I think you kind of sum it up real well at the end here, just, looking at the enrollment, the facilities, the staffing. We need to take a big picture look at going forward in the district. And so all those things have to come into play. They can't just be one individual item that we look at and say, okay, we're going to do it here and not look at these other two areas, so.
Yeah, no, I think, I agree. It's a big picture, and it's considering all facilities, and even today, we're hearing that they're using the career tech space in a different way. So, I mean, I think we have to look at how things are, would be best in all those areas. So, good comments. Any other questions or comments by the board? Okay, do we vote on this?
So, so what we'll do is I will take I'll have recommendations. We didn't have any public comment. So I will take, unless somebody shows up here shortly, and I'll take the considerations that I've kind of provided and try to drill down a little bit and with some comments that have also been made or affirmations that have been given in different topic areas, and then build them into what's on page 20 and have considerations in academic and extracurricular programs. And that could be, we need to continue to do this, or we should focus on this, or there needs to be the board needs to have greater discussion, for example, about an SRO. We need to operationalize our facility and enrollment task force. Those are all get built into that demographic planning, those results. That's what we'll vote on. And so I'll build this, I'll share it out to the board when it's completed, likely in the near future, where I'll put those, kind of reword the discussion that's happened here and those affirmations. I'll put it in here, I'll send it out, and that's what we'll vote on. And if there's any areas that, as a board, you think, boy, we didn't encapsulate this enough, then let's, I'll share it out so you can help me create those goals in these areas.
Okay, Jason, go ahead.
I would appreciate a central office capsule in the staffing section, if that's a possibility.
Sure, it's two. Yeah. Well, I guess if you include food service, tech department, so 4. But 4 can stay consistent, and I'll add that in a column row, 3.5.
Any other comments? And if there's things that, you think of later, make sure that, I know we've had kind of touched a lot of these points, but if there's something that you feel like this really needs to be brought out more, just let Dr. Luck know before he sends out the final report on that as well. And then we'll bring that back. Okay. Anything else from the board? And we don't have any public here, but anything, if there were, we would allow public comment at this time for 3 to 5 minutes. All right. Before we resume our regular meeting, and my plan is to go up to number 3, regular meeting, and just go through the ones that have not been covered yet on that first page, going on to the second. But before we do that, Jason, do you have something else at the moment?
The consent agenda also we did not deal with?
Okay, we will. I think we approved that. Yeah, that part, I know. We agreed, we did jump around, and I will summarize that all when but since we've been here for 2 hours, I'm going to take a 5-minute restroom break for anyone who might need it, and then we will come back and start our regular meeting at the top and go through what was not covered.
You get to hear from me again.
So, we have a superintendent report coming up. So. Okay, meeting back in session. We're going to start at the number 3 regular meeting. I'll just summarize that we've covered the student council report, the board education, and the only item that was an action item that the board acted upon was the curriculum assessment instruction. We approved the revised 2022-2023 school calendar. The rest were just informational for the board. So under regular meeting A, recognition, we'd like to congratulate Mrs. Lynette Ryan for being the Stutzman County Teacher of the Year. Gail, would you read a little bit of information about that for us tonight?
The board wishes to congratulate Mrs. Lynette Ryan on receiving Stutzman County Teacher of the Year. Mrs. Ryan has taught at Louis L'Amour Elementary School for 21 years. Mrs. Ryan was named the 2006 Milken Educator Award recipient, which recognizes excellence in the world of education. Miss Ryan, or Mrs. Ryan, I wanted to revert back to Miss Patrick, sorry. Wished to be here and wished to thank everyone for this honor.
Thank you, Gail. And we congratulate her and make sure that she gets a certificate that we have for her. So thank you. Very nice. No correspondence for B. We've had the student council report C. We've completed board education D. We're moving on to the superintendent's report E. Dr. Luck.
Thank you. You have my written report. I'm going to scroll to the bottom of page 1, the kindergarten enrollment update, just to give you an update of where we're at. Things have slowed down a bit. As you know, when we were at 77, we were a little bit more concerned, and things are picking up, which is great, but they've kind of leveled off a bit. Again, I would encourage anybody that has a kindergarten age student to call central office and register. Our boundary numbers, well, at 106, our boundary numbers are on the low side of normal. At 2 of our double section buildings, Gustner and Lincoln, are both at 32, which is 16 a section. And again, that's kind of the lower side of normal for us, but they are there. We have 3 buildings, Louis L'Amour at 11, Washington at 10, both single section buildings, and then Roosevelt currently is lagging behind a little bit with 17, although I would say that they are always the lowest in enrollment at this time period. I'm not sure what that represents, but fairly consistently, we see Roosevelt at lower numbers, and then things start to pick up for them. And just make the point that we're getting closer to that 7th section or that level for the 7th, at least the 7th section. But I will say that as our numbers are spread around, those numbers get harder to move families. But we'll just have to see where we're at. My intention right now, typically we work, pretty strictly with boundary numbers or boundary enrollments. If you are in this area, you go here. I will say, I think for now, until things start to normalize or level off a little bit between schools, I think I'm going to hold steady at 16 per section at Gustner and Lincoln, and then fill other spots to see if we can, as we start to increase our numbers. So the middle school assistant principal hiring process, we have interviews set for later this week for 5 interviews. We had 14 total candidates. Just to start the process off, as we've typically done in the process that I've used, and I think everybody now, Mr. Rohr is a part of it, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Tweeten, and Ms. Nelson have not done this with me, but we start with a survey. We look at skills, attributes, characteristics, and of course the job description. We build specifically questions in the interview around the skills and attributes that we're looking for, and of course the job description, to ensure that we're asking the right questions so we can find the right fit. It's not about a piece of paper or a credential, it's about the fit in the position. So we're going to engage that interview team this week. That is 2 middle school staff, 2 administrators, 1 school board member, and myself. And so we met last week, scheduled those interviews for this week, and I would anticipate having a recommendation to the board by the end of the school year, which would mean we might have to have a brief special meeting to make that formal offer out. But I will have a recommendation for you at that time. I'll just pause for questions on those two topics.
Any questions? Jason?
So your thought on 7 sections of kindergarten is a likely potential?
I think so.
So then, would we really need to post that? We had a kindergarten teacher that was transitioned to Title I. Would she be opted to have her position back?
So from a personnel standpoint, we would continue on as we have planned. So we'd be looking for staffing.
Thank you.
Gail?
Would she be eligible to apply for that position then?
Sure.
If she showed desire?
Jason?
Just a couple thoughts on that. You know, and I know we can't talk about specific personnel per se at the board table. I just want us to think about her qualifications versus the potential of not finding someone as qualified as her at this stage of the game. I'm not saying we couldn't. I just see we have the resource there to fill the spot, so.
Jason, I don't know that we want to talk about specific personnel issues at a board meeting. And secondly, we hire administrators to fill staffing positions as they see fit, and the needs of not just one position, but the needs of the entire district is looked at. And especially, I don't think anyone on the board needs to single out any individuals for any position or make recommendations, because that's done by a process that we have in place that has worked well. So, any other questions? Okay.
So moving on to the bottom of page 2, traffic and transportation concerns. 2 things have come up that from a board standpoint, you need to be aware of. So recently, with Legacy Center changing hands, we are no longer able to park in the various parking lots around that space. That creates a big issue. Now, you could look and say, well, how is Lincoln all that different from Roosevelt? Roosevelt doesn't have a parking lot, and Louis L'Amour doesn't have a parking lot. Those are bigger campuses, and there's more space around those locations to park. This is really a significant concern in terms of traffic concentration and staffing, you know, where staff can park. So we have concerns there. I met last week with members of the city, law enforcement, some Lincoln staff and PTO to discuss solutions, and we looked at, if you can think of the campus, the Lincoln campus, my first thought was looking west, and was there a possibility on 3rd to turn that into diagonal parking? That would certainly solve the number of spaces issue. It's absolutely the least cost effective. There's other concerns backing up into a busy street, especially at in diagonal parking if you look at the diagonal parking on 3rd Avenue, backing up into 3rd Avenue when an already highly concentrated space with traffic, that's concerning. Snow removal was a little bit concerning, probably even more so than that, because I think the snow removal could be addressed. But if we wanted to fit diagonal parking in, you're going to have to move the fence, eliminate move the sidewalk, which is an additional expense. You're likely going to move that play structure too. I'm not so sure that that's the best option, even though it would give us the most space in terms of parking spots. So we have an opportunity that we didn't have 2 years ago or even a year ago, where the transition house is. And we had a significant amount of conversation around what could that space look like. If you look at where the transition house previously was and where that fencing line has been, if you extend that fence all the way on the north side, all the way to the school building, you could create a parking lot there that I'm guessing can fit 2022, somewhere in that range. If we want to look at being cost effective, we could use packed gravel in that space, and that would make that a little bit easier, which isn't that unusual for that location anyway. A lot of those parking spots have gravel there. We would have to, though, think about the east, where we have like 3 spots available on the east. We would have to pave that to meet code for handicap parking. But if we did, because if we add that spot by code, we're going to have to add handicap accessible parking, which you aren't going to be able to do with gravel. But it would work to transition that small 3-car lot into, we could pave that really pretty easily, and then that could cover our handicap accessible. That's still pretty much in its infancy in terms of what we can do. I don't find another option, and I think if we don't do anything, it's going to be very challenging around Lincoln Elementary with 200 kids at 8 o'clock in the morning and at 3:30 every day, and with busing. So my plan will be to work to get that north area parking lot. It's not going to solve the problems, but it's going to at least take the staff parking out of the issue, out of that particular problem, at least 22 spots. So it's certainly better than the alternative 2022. I think it depends on how it fits out.
Aaron?
How many spots would you need to satisfy all the staff there for parking?
40? 40 to 50 is what I think we would need total. 40, yeah, if you talk part-time.
Free lunch
But-
if you carpool?
Yeah, 30. We also
In
did
other
talk
words,
about,
adding that parking lot isn't going to solve the total problem.
It
but
is not
it'll
at all.
help take the sting off a little bit.
correct.
Yeah.
It's not going to solve the problem, but it is going to eliminate, some of the on-street parking that happens by staff now. They can move to, around like the north part of the building. And of course, those are residences in that area, and we certainly hear a lot about that, about parking on the street there. And it would allow more spaces for short-term pickup and drop-off that we don't have now. We did look to see if we could, just get permits into the one spot, but there are different issues that are going on there with their ability to meet all of the needs that they see, and so they'll need those spots. At least that's what they've communicated to us. So it's a challenge that we just have to keep working through, and I don't have a solution other than that.
And is this the solution for now, and we'll just keep looking at?
Yeah,
what we can
I
do in
think,
the
I don't know
future,
of a different
so-
solution, but I think that's the best one we've got.
Okay, thank you. Diane?
I don't know if the city eliminated the idea, but the diagonal parking on Third, that's my route into town, and I can tell you it would become a safety issue because there's a lot of traffic on that road. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Oh, Gail?
With that parking too, something would need to be done. I think of your traveling teachers, having been one when I was in the elementary. If they're walking 2 or 3 blocks in the winter, and that you're losing contact time with kids, and, it takes longer than you think.
No, I agree. And so my intention would be to continue to work. I've started some conversations with Interstate Engineering now, a very preliminary, and continue conversations with them. And I would have to revise the capital projects plan to come back to this group to adjust with cost. Because I don't think we have a choice. I think we have to move forward with this.
Thank you, Jane.
And
Go ahead.
this needs to be done by this fall?
Yep. Yeah, so it will be a challenge that we will work through. So into the transportation side, this board has heard a number of times that we struggle, and especially recently, in activities and busing. That's been a struggle for us this year. Dietrich's, they've done the job that they can do. They don't have drivers either. They're not choosing not to do it. They don't have drivers. They don't have the capacity as a business to do it. And while that can be frustrating, it's, instead of admiring the problem, I'm thinking we need to run to the problem and find out what the solution is. And so we had Blue Jay vans, and I think Blue Jay vans have helped us in some instances, but they were never our perfect option, and they were never the preferred option. They're smaller, the wheelbase is narrower, so that makes their, safety issues or a bit more safety issues. We try different things, like we rent vans, vehicles when we need to. We've talked about parent transportation. Our preferred option has always been 14-passenger buses. So the 14-passenger buses do not require a CDL, but they do require a valid driver's license and a safety course. So if we could provide a safety course like the one through North Dakota Safety Council, anybody with a driver's license could drive those buses just like they would take the van. Now, the benefit of the buses, they are bigger, so the size in the seat isn't necessarily all that much bigger, but there's more space in the vehicle. You know, we're talking about hauling equipment, spreading out. You know, those things get a little bit more, get a little bit easier for transportation in those. The problem, even when we talked about this a few years ago when we looked at buses, or at Blue Jay vans, is they're expensive. And they're hard to find used. I found used, whether they still are available right now or not. I know 5 were available last week, and 3 are available on Saturday when I talked to the gentleman last. And I did ask if he would save them, and he said no, he couldn't do that. But they're reasonably priced. They're $34,000 per unit. I have 78,300, but it's 73,000 to 78,000 miles on these units. I think if we could replace our Blue Jay vans with 14-passenger buses, I think our activities department would be much happier. They would be able to use those for more activities. I think they would be more comfortable for our students. I think they would be a safer vehicle. And we actually have had some preliminary conversations with a community group that has interest in at least one of the vans, if not both. So we could save, at least defray the cost of the 14-passenger buses by selling the vans. And I think we could have some use for them if we needed to in the district too, or at least one of them. One purpose I could see, but I'm just looking for some guidance. If I'm on the right path, I'll talk with this bus company and bring a budget revision to the board on it. If not, then we'll continue to find other solutions, but I struggle with them, and I think our parents have been, and our students and our coaches have been very, very understanding in this year. I think their patience will eventually wear out, and they'll say, why are you not doing more? And I think this is trying to run to the problem. So questions?
Melissa, go ahead.
You had mentioned that there's not a lot of space in the buses, like for hauling equipment and stuff. With that, not having the CDL, but just having that safety course, does that also enable them to like pull a cargo trailer? Okay. So that's a possibility if they need
Yeah,
it.
it would be no different than taking any vehicle and hauling a trailer.
Okay. Aaron?
Yeah, I read this here, and, you know, the way I'm looking at it is, you know, we're deficit spending for this year already, and this is just gonna pile onto that even more. I'd like to see if we can't find alternate solutions that doesn't cost the district this type of money. If we weren't deficit spending, it'd be something be different, but and then looking at what we have to do with the parking lot now, I think there's other challenges and other priorities in front of the district than purchasing 2 vehicles, so that's just my input.
Dr. Leck, did you want to come in?
I was just going to say, shifting 2 vehicles from one, there would be an opportunity to sell the vehicles. And I completely understand the concern for the budget, and I agree. I'm just not sure we have viable alternatives that exist outside of that, and I just don't, I think outside of telling activities that we aren't going, which I don't think is what will be, that response will be tough. I don't see a lot of solutions that are viable outside of doing something like this.
Yep, go ahead and finish up, Aaron, and then we have a couple others.
Has Dietrich indicated this, do they foresee this as a long-term problem, or is this a short-term problem that we're trying to solve
It's
here?
long-term. You
This
know,
is gonna be a
they've tried to
systemic-
work, and it's just, I think their average age of driver is in the 70s. They're trying. And we've tried to work with them, and communicated with us, but I think from an activity standpoint, it's become very, very frustrating. When we can't do field trips or we can't do, activities, or we don't know what to do with parents driving or renting vans when they're not available, when we all know that
Can't rent.
you can't rent right now because those vehicles don't exist. I'm not sure what option exists.
Melissa? Oh, sorry. Melissa, sorry. I'll get to you, Gail, next.
Do you have kind of an idea of what you might be able to get for the vans that we're looking at selling? And then my other question is, if parents are driving them,
There's
we're
liability.
wide open for liability
There's
issues.
liability. So I think I know that a community group is going to talk about making offers on the vans, later this week. So it's hard for me to say, but I think just like any used vehicle right now, there's value to them. I do get concerned about the narrow wheelbase and having them be safety issues.
Gail, you were next, sorry. And then Jason.
With deficit spending, have we countered in or factored in the fact that we did have unfilled positions where we did not pay out for those staff and benefits, so that it may, maybe we have an opportunity because of those unfilled positions where the deficit isn't quite as impacted? Or what would that, could we look at what that number is and if that does balance that out somewhat?
Yeah, I can do a projection. I mean, Aaron, I'm not sure what your deficit from the beginning of the year, so, it's a whole different picture. And I can do a projection. I can't give you one off the top of my head, but there's positions, obviously, every teacher in every school that has to empty their trash. We have several, custodians that haven't been filled. So the picture now compared to what it was at the beginning of the year is different. And, I'm happy to do that calculation and maybe at the special board meeting or, whatever, have somewhat of a better idea.
Jason? Oh, very good. Okay, and then Diane.
Having worked with Dr. Leck this long, I know my job is to figure out if he's doing his job. And my experience has been that if he tells me there's very few alternatives, I know there's very few alternatives. My husband's also one of the drivers for UJ, and it's just a nightmare right now. And so I would say deficit spending or not, if our superintendent says that this is an area that needs attention, I think we should really listen. And I agree with Melissa, this liability that we're just hanging out there, because it's either have parents drive them or not have the activity at this point. So it is a viable alternative to buy these 14 passengers. Thank you.
Does the board wish to do a vote, or should we just give Dr. Leck some direction about how we generally feel on this? So it's not on the agenda, right? But just, I think we give him some general direction as to, because if there were 5 available on Friday, 3 on Saturday, it's Monday night now. So they're going to be gone. I know they're difficult to find as well, because I don't think we're not the only ones looking for these right now. So Aaron, go ahead.
Just a comment on, the revenue side of it here. Is there something we can look at in terms of fee schedules for the activities to help defray the cost of these? Or is there anything that we could look at from that perspective?
I think in the short term, no. Long term, yes, you could increase your activity fees, although I think you've already done that. Or you could have just absorbed that as part of your, even if you had, like Sally said, what we project at the beginning of the year is, as a projected deficit, is not an actual. I think we could anticipate that being less than what we projected it to be. We do have a carryover balance. We've seen that, we have a larger balance than we might typically have at this time because of ESSER dollars, things that have come in. I would, from my perspective, it's an investment that we can absorb to make, even if we got to the point where it would be a deficit in this year. I think the impact in a $30+ million budget would be, relatively marginal that we could absorb. That would be my perspective. And I just don't know what choice we have. I think it's something we need to do.
And I can say I've heard, and maybe the rest of the board has also heard from parents on the activity side of, what the responsibility of getting your child there is not just showing up at game time, or at event time or singing time. It's getting them there early in time to prepare. It provides a burden to parents as well. Go ahead, Dr. Luck.
And if I could just make one comment too. My original intention was to build this into our budget for next year and address this through a budget process. My impetus to do it now, which is atypical, is that there are, at least there were on Saturday, whether those still exist now is a whole different animal, but there were options for used. And I want to be as cost-effective as I'd rather buy, and even new ones, I don't even know how, those are impossible to find too. But there's options for used right now that are half the price. And I'd like to think, rather than building that into the budget, making that decision now would provide what we need as soon as possible, but at a cheaper option. Of course, they're older, maintenance needs, things like that. But I think it's, a reasonable place to be at. And I think it's an option that we need. I know if Mr. Roltz and Mr. Stillwell were here, they would tell you we need to do something as soon as possible. They're struggling.
Gail.
I would like to give you the direction to move forward and do that. Our activities are a wonderful opportunity for kids. They're an excellent way to keep kids in school. Many districts where I have relatives teaching are moving to models where these people are using things like this to meet that need. I wouldn't want to see us raise that fee structure because I don't think that's fair to kids who have family income issues right now. If we can have this opportunity now, I think it's important that we do. Activities they're very important. And I think it would give some of those coaches a little more freedom too.
Do we need a motion?
Well, it isn't on the agenda, so I think what we're really looking for is just some general direction from the interest, as well as, we don't even know if these vehicles are available, so this is, he would have to check and then let them know. Melissa, go ahead.
Can we have a special meeting like tomorrow afternoon and have it on the agenda? Does that give enough time, or?
Yeah, Melissa, I think this is not a huge, it's a budget item, but it's, by time we consider at least this, if this group doesn't buy the van, there's value in our vans. I think the difference between the value of our vans and the purchase of these is not like huge amounts of money. This is about like,
but he
it's about
can't,
like gravel.
he can't buy a van unless we vote on it. Is my understanding, right? Or maybe not.
I sort of see it like the gravel that we're buying for our parking lot. So, I think we want a general direction. If you want it on a future agenda to solidify it, we can do that. But I think tonight we have to probably give some direction or not. Yes or, yes.
Could we agree as a board then to give Dr. Leck direction to look into whether they've sold? If they have not, to buy the 2 vans, and then we will do whatever we have to do in terms of agenda item and do it tomorrow
future.
morning.
Okay. Dan, you haven't commented, yeah, so.
Activities are a core function that we have to do, and it's adapting to the situation. I think you've heard that, the budget issue is something we need to consider. So,
Yes.
I'd be in favor of moving ahead with this opportunity.
If it exists.
If it exists.
Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think we just do what we need to do and to try to secure it. But then if we need to, I'll support any special meeting, whatever time, and just for timeliness and support, so.
So what I would do is to talk to this gentleman tonight and ask him if they're available, and I'd set something from a special meeting up. It would be quickly, that would give me the official, if my general direction is yes, then we would set a meeting, a special meeting, if they're available or if two are available, and then I'll bring that back to the board. Does everybody feel comfortable with that?
Dr. Luck, what I'm hearing is support, general support for the idea of purchasing these, and there's a few things you have to go through to get that done. If you feel like there's a special meeting that we need to have, otherwise we can place it on the next agenda, and you can kind of see how your conversation goes. Yes, Sally?
Erin, to make you feel more comfortable too, and the board, activities sometimes has to get students there, and if Dietrich's isn't available, they are, hiring, spending dollars, spending more money trying to get them there, so just.
And if anyone wants to drive bus, contact central office, and they will.
Please do.
They will work you through the process of what it takes, and so, any other comments or, okay. So like I said, we have general direction that we're going to move forward with. It's a timely issue here to see if these two are available. We've had some really good discussion on impacts to our budget as well as impacts to our students and activities. And the idea is we're going to sell at least one of the other vans, if not both, depending on the interest in that or the other uses in our district by other areas. And we'll move forward with that, and we'll either hear from Dr. Leck about a special meeting or it'll be placed on the next agenda. So if anyone's not comfortable with that, please let me know at this time. Okay, moving forward. Are you done with your?
Two more things.
Two more things, okay.
And I know I've talked a lot at you, but I go back to our planning meeting. That's important information that you need to hear, that the public needs to hear. So it was well worth the hour, even though you had to listen to me for an hour, and now you have to listen to me for more time. But great news, really exciting news. I had the choir came, show choir came and sang at central office, and I had a chance to talk to at least some of our governor's choir. In 2009, the last year that Jamestown High School was named as the governor's choir. So that's 85 student participants. That'll be the Jamestown, or from Jamestown High School will be the governor's choir for 22-23. So huge congratulations to them. What a great honor that is, as well as Mrs. Cheryl McIntyre. That's a big deal for her as well. So couldn't be prouder of that group of students. So congratulations to them. So
Very exciting.
You'll have, one of the things you'll be acting on is proposed lunch prices. I will tell you, I've had conversations with, and I think I mentioned this in my last report, we're hoping for USDA waivers to continue through 22-23. And when we think about the waivers, it seems like we talk a lot about the universal meals piece, but that's only part of it. Universal meals is part of the waivers, but maybe even more importantly is the flexibility for meal regulations. We have nutrition requirements that we have to fit into. When you're looking at supply chain concerns and escalating prices for commodities or limited commodities, it's really hard for us sometimes to be able to meet those dietary restrictions or regulations. And so that's one of the conversations we had with Senator Hoven's office was, however you feel about universal meals, flexibility is really something that we need in this current environment. Universal meals, I will say that we're seeing more kids eating meals. We're seeing more kids in our breakfast numbers are skyrocketing through the roof because of this, and we all know how important breakfast is. So I'll say that's a win even for universal meals. And I know people feel differently about that. The $11 billion price tag. So it's a significant taxpayer contribution. The federal government would commit to something like this. But do we see more kids eating lunch and eating breakfast and eating in the summer? Yeah, we 100% do. And I think that's a win. So regardless of how you feel about universal meals, we're seeing more kids eating meals, and the flexibility is a must. And that's the communication that we've had with Senator Hoven's office. It's really been challenging to estimate what our food service costs are going to be, and this is another conversation that we had with Senator Hoven was, it's really hard to say how much you need right now. What should our fund balance be? 3 to 4 months of expenditures is kind of the gold standard in food service. And it's hard for us to know what that's going to be because of escalating food costs. We need that, we almost need this next year to allow prices for commodities, for food service, to kind of stabilize a little bit. And then we'll know, what should the prices be? And so when Joe Oster and I talked about, what should that increase be, we settled on 20 to 25 cents from last year's established prices. But it's important to note that it's been a couple years since people paid. So if we increase 20 to 25 cents from last year, that's 40 to 50 cents higher than the last time somebody paid meals. But that doesn't cover our costs. We're going to see a deficit on 20 to 25 cents. Can we absorb it? I think we can. But if you wanted to actually meet what we're projecting for cost, that would have to be significantly higher than that. And until prices stabilize, I'm just not so sure. I would much rather say 20 to 25 cents now. We monitor the costs and the balance over the course of the year, and if we have to course correct in mid-year, I'd rather do that than throw a really high number at people when they haven't paid for 2 years. I think it's just more respectful to what's happening. And we've been able to build a healthy carryover because of the universal meals. Because all meals are reimbursable, we're getting a higher reimbursement rate for every meal. So that ending fund balance, or our interim balance, increased pretty significantly over the 2 years of universal meals. If you remember, we had to infuse about $100,000 into our food service, and we've doubled that in those 2 years. So we're at a healthy fund balance of where we should be. I think we eat into that, in my opinion, and that's what this recommendation is based on. So we're not putting our families at such a high increase, because that could be double that amount of what they paid the last time that they went. And I think this is consistent with what a lot of schools are looking at, trying to just eat a little bit of that cost on their own so that you're not passing off so much. And again, if universal meals happens, that gives us another year for costs to stabilize. If they don't, let's just monitor it and course correct as we need to. But that's the recommendation that'll come from, for me, later on in your agenda for meal costs. So with that, I'm finally done for
Any other questions?
a while.
Under number 4A is where that will cover that. If no other questions, we're going to move forward in the agenda. We've already had our public demographic planning meeting for F, nothing under old business G. Under H, nothing under activities, nothing under buildings and grounds. Under curriculum assessment and instruction, we have already approved the revised 2022-2023 school calendar to those 2 days off in October and March, and we'll send the calendar out. Number 4, finance. This is where is there a motion to approve the lunch prices for 2022 to 2023? So, motion by Gail, second by Aaron. Any discussion? There being no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Under B, general fund balance is there for your information. C, monthly financials. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Aaron, second by Dan. Any discussion? There being no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Number 5, personnel. Approval to hire Cassandra Ward as physical education teacher, elementary school, a salary of $45,207.77 for the 2022-2023 school year upon successful background check. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Gail? Second. Second by Jason. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. B, approval of Megan Scott, special education strategist at the high school, salary of $45,207.77 for the 2022-2023 school year, contingent on a successful licensure and background check. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Melissa, second by Gail. Any discussion? There being no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries, and welcome to our district. Number 6, policy, nothing under policy and procedures. 7, tuition. Approval of a tuition agreement for a Carrington kindergarten student to attend Jamestown Public Schools for the 2022-2023 school year. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Melissa. Second by Dan. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. B, approval of a tuition agreement for an Edgeley kindergarten to attend Jamestown Public Schools for the 2022-2023 school year. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Aaron, second by Melissa. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Number 8, other, approval of the middle school handbook for the 2022-2023 school year. Is there a motion? Motion by Gail. Second by Melissa. Any discussion? I'll just comment, I appreciate the highlighted changes, so I can look for those and see the changes. There being no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. B, approval of the 2021 to 2023 technology plan. Is there a motion to approve? We can have discussion in a minute. Motion by Melissa, second by Jason. Any discussion on the technology plan? Any questions? We may be able to answer some questions, and we may have to defer them if not. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, so within the plan, and I've kind of been watching this and it's been going through the past couple of years here with our technology spend. We don't really give a whole lot of guidance in the technology plan from a strategic standpoint, what we're trying to do with software and equipment. And it's kind of, it seems like it's fragmented and it's not a real cohesive, we're driving towards a simplified solution. And as one section specifically is 1.8, where it's additional software for education and administrative needs is purchased as needed and is pre-approved through the technology department. It's an ad hoc process, and I was just wondering if we could give some structure around what are we trying to do as a district in terms of our software architecture, our equipment needs, because just looking at the, what was in the consent agenda for today and the bills, we had $14,000 going to 11 different locations on equipment, on software licenses, on different things, and it's like, again, it just doesn't seem like it's a focused area for the district. So I was just looking to see if we couldn't get some level of improvement. I'm not sure of the process to accomplish that, but I just wanted to raise that point.
Dr. Leck, go ahead.
Well, I would like to have Mr. Armitage representing the tech committee to be here to answer some of those questions and take some of that guidance when we go through. If the board is not ready to approve this yet, we could certainly have that conversation and ask Mr. Armitage to come, or we can approve it now and continue to have that dialogue around what we need to be doing with the tech plan to improve it.
Dan.
Are the elements of this plan in the projected or the current budget? Do we know that the elements that are part of this plan?
Budget coming up? No.
No, okay.
Well, there's an allocation
There's
that
an
goes to district tech every
I
year.
have Mike's tech budget, I stand correct, but I don't know what,
I guess my main question is, are these activities mapped to the dollars and the
The dollars are there that have consistently been planned for district technology. So it's not representing a greater spend than what we would have planned to spend in our next year's budget, or next 2 years' budget anyway.
Okay.
And this report is coming in later than it typically does.
I guess the bottom line is this is a framework for how to spend that allocation.
Correct.
Okay.
So does the board wish to table this? We need a motion. Otherwise, we can approve it, and it is kind of, this report did come late, and then work on some guidance for the next report. You make some really good points, Aaron, and Dan as well.
Are you on the technology committee?
I am on the technology committee.
Do you have a recommendation on what we could or should do?
I think either way, we're probably, I think you make some good points, and that those would be some good recommendations. We are, typically, this report comes in much earlier in the year, and so at this point, this is kind of the, approval of 2021. So we're partway through this, moving into 2023. So, and I think Mike would be probably best to answer some of the questions that you have, and then how, like, the building facilitators, those budgets and the tech budgets and how that all maps together, so. So like I said, we're partway through this plan already. So I think, since we're halfway through, I think either way you go is gonna be okay. But I do think you make some good points, and I think those are probably some further discussions that we may wanna have. And especially as we work toward this new, as we work toward our strategic plan, lining those up better, I think streamlining it would make sense. So that's my thoughts. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I think I'm probably good with just, if we want to just go ahead and, with the approval and then take it on as a continuous improvement type of approach. Because it's, it's not necessarily real straightforward to accomplish some of this stuff, but I think that's an area that we should look at from the district perspective on making sure we have that clarity and transparency.
Any other comments, Dan or Jason? Okay. Yeah, and like I said, I think we're partway, since it's 21 to 23, we're well on our way through this. But Jane will make a note in the minutes that we'll approve this today, but, move forward with the approval. We'll take a vote here in a minute, but to probably look at some alignment in the future, so. And there was a motion and a second. So all those in favor of, and who made the original motion? I think Melissa. Okay. Melissa and then Jason. Okay. So it's a motion approved. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Okay. Items for future agenda. I think we should have about a 30-minute discussion on this. Jason?
Would it be too much to have the state choir recognize them, or is that in the plan?
I just wanted to provide that information
Yeah.
right away, but we want to
Definitely.
make a big deal.
Yeah, very exciting.
That's a great idea.
That would be great. That would be
It's
great.
one of the highlights of,
Yes.
of when they come around and visit me at Christmas time and at the end of the year. I really, really enjoy that, so I'm sure I bet you they would.
That'd be great. Fantastic. Great idea. We'll have that. Any other items for future? It is getting late in the night, so if you have other items, just let Dr. Leck or myself know for that. And meetings to be scheduled. We have the GED graduation on Tuesday, May 17th, 2022 at 7 p.m. the Thompson Community Room at the middle school. And anyone can attend that one, correct? Yep, okay. Transition House graduation on Wednesday, May 18th, 2022 at 11 a.m. in the bunker. Health Insurance Committee meeting is on Monday, May 23rd, 2022 at 3:45 in the multipurpose room at the middle school. High school graduation Sunday, May 29th, 2022 at 2:30 p.m. in the Jamestown Civic Center. I think those that are attending know who they are. School board meeting is on Monday, June 6th, 2022 at 5:15 p.m. in the Thompson Community Room in the middle school. And Dr. Luck will let us know if we need a special meeting. Your monthly superintendent evaluation is board relations and human resource management. There being no further business before the board, meeting is adjourned.